The NFL season is upon us, and I always think it is nice to kind of look back and see how the best do it. So today we are going to look, I do this in every sport, how they were built, the Kansas City Chiefs, looking at how they put together their championship roster. We begin with Patrick Mahomes. The Patrick Mahomes trade tree is insane. I did it a couple of years ago. We're updating it and running it again probably on Tuesday next week. The trade tree is just absolutely wild. But what you need to know is he was acquired from Buffalo in a draft day trade. The Chiefs move up and they get Patrick Mahomes. Isaiah Pacheco was a seventh round pick in 2022. That is incredible value to get that player. Rashee Rice, a second round pick, 55th overall in 2023. Obviously, there's a lot going on off the field with him right now, but a very valuable piece of that team last year and was really coming into his own. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, free agent signing in the offseason before 2022, 2023. Not a huge hit, but still a big one. Obviously, one of the big ones here is Travis Kelce, the Pro Bowler, a third round pick, 63rd overall in 2013. I would say that's worked out a little bit. On the offensive line, you have Donovan Smith, a free agent signing before last year at left tackle. At left guard, their Pro Bowler, Joe Thuney. By the way, when I'm saying Pro Bowler, it just means for last season. He was a free agent signing before the 2021-2022 season. Creed Humphrey, a second round pick, 63rd overall in 2021. He also was a Pro Bowler last year. Trey Smith, was a sixth round pick starting at right guard for the Chiefs as he goes 226th overall in 2021. That pick was part of a package that was sent to the Jets to get Sam Darnold for the Panthers. Also part of a swap with the Panthers where Carolina moved up and Kansas City takes Trey Smith and Noah Gray, kind of their backup tight end in waiting. And then on right tackle, it is Jawan Taylor, free agent signing before the 2023-2024 season. On the defensive side, George Karlaftis is a first-round pick, 30th overall in 2022. You have Chris Jones, defensive tackle, first-team All-Pro last year. He was a second-round pick, 37th overall in 2016. That pick was part of a deal with the 49ers that they sent to the Chiefs to move back into the first round to get Joshua Garnett. Garnett started 11 games in 3 seasons before retiring in 2020. I would say that trade down worked out for the Kansas City Chiefs. Also on the defensive tackle spot, you have Derek Nottie, a third-round pick in 2018. That pick was traded to Baltimore as the Ravens moved up to get Mark Andrews. So not that this team needed a Mark Andrews, but interesting how that one worked out. At defensive line, fifth round pick in 2020, 177th overall was Michael Dana. In the linebacker spot, Willie Gay, second round pick, 63rd overall in 2020. That pick was acquired for Dee Ford, which at the time looked like oh my God, what is Kansas City doing getting rid of Dee Ford? They end up getting the pick that turns into their starter. Nick Bolton is a second round pick. He's their middle linebacker, 2021, second round, went 58th overall. Leo Chenal, a outside linebacker, started for them last year. Third round pick, 2022 NFL draft. At corner, you have Trent McDuffie. He goes first round, 21st overall. In the 2022 NFL draft, pick acquired from the Patriots as Kansas City moved up 9 spots to get that player. L'Jarius Sneed, fourth round pick in 2020. Kansas City moved up to get him with the Tennessee Titans. Justin Reed, a free agent signing before the 2022-2023 season, and Brian Cook, second round pick in 2022. So what are the lessons that we can learn here? Obviously, the biggest lesson that allows Kansas City to do what they do is have Patrick Mahomes, which is not something anyone else can do. He is a one of one in this sport and is, I think, already the most talented quarterback in the history of this league and may go down just as the GOAT. So all of this that I'm going to say after is 100% with the asterisk on it that having Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are the two biggest reasons the Kansas City Chiefs have gone on to win the Super Bowl. But you still need to surround them with talent. And what you are seeing on this is a team that has hit on their draft picks. A team that, like you look at, there's a couple first round picks in here, right? And those first round picks have really hit, right? Like Trent McDuffie, I think he's going to come up a few times. this preview season. George Karlaftis, same thing, like a dynamite defensive end at the back end of the first round. Rashee Rice is a second round pick, comes up with some big plays, helping them win a championship. Creed Humphrey, second round pick, helps them win a championship, Pro Bowler down the middle as your center. Second round pick in 2016, Chris Jones, first team All Pro. Second round pick, Willie Gay. So yes, they are picking late in each of these rounds, but they are going out and they are acquiring some pieces that are going to be plugged in and make an impact. They've also, I think, done a really, really good job of recognizing the players they want, having an understanding of how the draft board is going, and moving up and down accordingly. There's a couple of these where it's okay, well, this was a move down. We went out and got Derek Nottie. Yeah, you got Mark Andrews. You probably needed that, but we were able to get a starting defensive tackle. We have a pick swap here. Let's go get a starting right guard and our backup tight end. The Patrick Mahomes one is just brilliance all around. And so this team has done such an amazing job of building this thing through the draft. And that is what you have to do. And they have to keep doing it because Patrick Mahomes' contract isn't getting cheaper. So when you have to deal with a gigantic contract on your books, you have to make some sacrifices. And they did that with Tyreek Hill. And then again, you're able to replace him with Rashee Rice and a second round pick. You get this year a late first round pick with Xavier Worthy that can kind of be your speed guy. You have to hit on some of these late in the round or just later round draft picks, and the Kansas City Chiefs have been marvelous at that. And so that is one, again, I don't want to push back on it entirely because you have Patrick Mahomes, and that is the big reason why Kansas City was able to win the Super Bowl last year in the last couple of seasons. But when you see people like, well, the only what, like, well, I mean, what do you expect? These guys were drafting late in drafts. So they, late in the first round, you're not going to get those difference makers there. Trent McDuffie's a difference maker. George Karlaftis is a difference maker. They were drafted 21st and 30th overall in the first round. It is inherently more difficult to just not be drafting at the top of every draft and still supplementing your roster with solid picks. But I do think in the NFL, you can get those guys. The one thing you can't do is get that quarterback. Kansas City recognized it, moved up, got Patrick Mahomes. I love how this team has been built and how they have been able to put this together, where you recognize a franchise quarterback, you move heaven and earth to get to that franchise quarterback, move up, get him. And now for a bit, they supplement him with Travis Kelce, who's still there, with Tyreek Hill, who's amazing, but not there anymore. We'll also get to that trade tree on Tuesday. You bring in like these veteran pieces that, and these very talented pieces that help him out. But when that quarterback progresses to a point where you have to sign him now, then you are able to kind of supplement it still by nailing some late round draft picks. That's how you turn into a dynasty. And it's like Buffalo has to do it now. The Chargers are doing it a little bit with Justin Herbert. Green Bay is going to have to do it. Miami's going to have to do it. They don't have Patrick Mahomes, but if they can hit on some of these late round and late in the round draft picks, that is how you win championships. So that is how the Kansas City Chiefs were built and how they built their Super Bowl contender and Super Bowl winner from last year. Our NFL 2024 preview continues on here. Today is the last day we are looking back to last season and what we can learn from that. The rest of it is all looking forward. And so today is the NFL accountability episode where I go over what I got right, what I got wrong from the main picks from last year. We're not going to go over every team, but we are going to do some of the fantasy stuff and some of the other segment things that I did. So, we will start with overvalued and undervalued. We'll start with overvalued. The main one there was the New York Jets. And now injuries helped us out a ton. I will grant you that, but that was part of why we thought that the Jets were overvalued. You have an old quarterback. I thought Aaron Rodgers was kind of cooked anyway. And so I kind of missed out on a full season of rightness, but still, that is one of the risks you take with a 40-something-year-old quarterback is injuries can happen. And sometimes it's 4.5 minutes into a season. So I will gladly take the W on that. We thought the Saints were overvalued at 9.5. We just got the win there. And kind of the same reasons we thought they were overvalued last year, we think they're going to be that again this year. Minnesota, we thought overvalued at 8.5. And again, now some of those same situations kind of popping up this year. Again, where I thought the defense took a pretty substantial step back, and I didn't know how good Kirk Cousins was going to be. Now, didn't know his leg was going to explode. But I still thought that there was a bit of a horseshoe from what happened 2 years ago. And then going into last year, I thought there was going to be a bit more regression than the market had built in. Carolina over 7.5. I think you're going to find we do this again with the number one overall pick. I thought they were overvalued. I thought that there was way too much just, oh yeah, Bryce Young will come in and fix everything. And then you look at the rest of the roster and, oh, well, it sucks. And so that one felt pretty easy. Denver over 8.5. We just get the win there. Admittedly, I thought that one, when I saw I had that down before I went back to the standings, I was like, oh man, we crushed that one. I didn't realize Denver had got to 8 wins on the season. So, but maybe another team we might look at in this category again coming up in a little bit. From a fantasy standpoint, Cooper Kupp at 7th overall thought was way overvalued. There was just a couple of these. Him and Tony Pollard. Everyone, and Najee Harris, quite frankly, everyone was drafting at best case scenario. And for Pollard, that regression hit like a house. Najee Harris, he finishes his RB20, so that's a win for us as well. Cooper Kupp, he gets hurt. But again, that's a risk factor that gets baked in with a old receiver, or older receiver, I should say. And that one stung for me because I have him in fantasy football, in a very deep, very competitive keeper league. And so that made it a bit challenging this season. But it felt like all three of those guys were a little bit overvalued. The two that we got wrong in overvalued, and I'm not just looking at what I got right, I promise you. But it was Travis Etienne and Jahmyr Gibbs. Etienne finishing RB, or I thought at RB12 was way overvalued. I just didn't think he was that good. And Tank Bigsby was going to come in and steal all that work. And instead, Etienne was amazing. Tank fumbled a bunch, and it was Etienne's backfield all season long. And so that was just a misevaluation of the talent by me on Etienne. And for Gibbs, we thought that the opportunities just maybe weren't going to be there with David Montgomery. And I also kind of thought Detroit was overvalued in general all season long. Gibbs does finish as the RB10. I will say for about 10 weeks, I was right on this, but just didn't quite get there. Undervalued now. We had the Titans undervalued at 7.5. That's obviously a loss. I thought because of the injuries that they had 2 years ago, that there was going to be just a full bounce back, and it just never really got there. We did get Seattle right at 8.5. People, I think, were just ready for Geno to fall off one more time. And while he kind of did, the rest of the team was quite good. The Chargers, we had them way undervalued. Last year was just a season from hell from there. And so I maybe should have learned to not trust that team, but I did. And then we had a couple week 1 plays. Cincinnati -4 against Cleveland. That was a big loss. And Philadelphia -4.5 against the Patriots. They won by 5. So we got that one right. And now in our season preview portion of it, Miami over 9.5. That was a win. Miami to win the division. That was a loss. Again, that looked like a win for about 15 weeks of the season. And then Tua just fell off. But that one, it was all well if Tua's one hit away from getting hurt. So yeah, it's football, man. So's everybody. And I think there might be a little bit of that baked into how I view this season as well. The New York Jets to miss the postseason. That one was a big win. We kind of discussed it before. Baltimore over 10.5 and to win the division. Very much believers in Baltimore last year. So we got a couple of wins there. Tennessee, we already went over it. We went over 7.5 and to win the division. That was strike 1 and strike 2. But Jacksonville under 9.5 and to miss the playoffs. WW on that. And there's, I might have changed my tune on that. I'm still doing a bit more of my NFL research, but as it goes along, they're a team that I'm getting there a little bit more and more. I kind of go back and forth on. The Houston Texans under 6.5. That one was a gigantic L. We got that one entirely wrong. We already discussed Chargers over 9.5. Got that one wrong. Kansas City under 11.5, but to win the AFC. Nailed that one absolutely perfectly. Denver under 8.5 was a win. The Raiders under 8.5 was a win as well. Although very, very, actually, was that a win? I have that marked down as a win, but I thought they finished 9-8. Maybe they were 8-9 last year. But either way, that one was not as close as we thought it was going to be after the start of the season. They do finish 8-9. So we did get that one right, but that one was supposed to be a lock for a bit. We had Philadelphia going to the Super Bowl. That was a miss. Green Bay over 7.5. That was a win. That I remember that. That was based off of, look, Aaron Rodgers got this team to over 7.5 wins last year, and he wasn't that good. So even if Jordan Love sucks, there's still going to be some progression there. Now we had them to win the division, and that was a loss. And we thought Detroit under 9.5 and to miss the playoffs, and that was a loss. Our biggest win of the year was Tampa Bay over 6.5 and to win the division. That was just kind of recognizing how bad the rest of the division was and just how evenly matched everyone there was. And so there might be a lesson to take from that. We will see. Carolina under 7.5. We got that one right. Seattle over 8.5. It's weird. I have that one as a win in one spot and as a loss in another. I may have got that wrong when looking at overvalued, undervalued. They finished at 9-8, so that's a win in this spot. So we do get that one correct, and then we went Arizona under 3.5, just getting a loss there. So the lessons, injuries helped us quite a bit with Aaron Rodgers. I guess that one specifically was, I guess the Chargers as well. They maybe hurt us a little bit as well. I think we tried to go too hard against the grain on the Detroit Lions. Although it worked out on Jacksonville as well. I thought we did a good job of kind of targeting who the bad teams were going to be. Didn't quite pinpoint or nail some of the good teams as well as I would have hoped. But overall, I think a pretty good season last year. But like I said, some lessons to take from that. I think that sometimes narratives really start to build, and that like the unknown of Jordan Love. Whoa, it's a drop from Aaron Rodgers. Well, how could they possibly? And the Tua situation where like, well, it's one hit away. What are they going to do? And so I think there is a little bit of value in going against some of those narratives some of the time. All right, let's continue works. Let's look at the top players in the National Football League. I think it's the start of every season is a good time to just, okay, let's reset. Let's see who are the actual guys in the NFL coming into this season. We will start at number 10. And a new player on this list, which we have a few of, it is Max Crosby. What he has been able to do with the Vegas Raiders, and there is some bias on my behalf, of course, but what he has been able to do as just kind of at times, and I am not saying this hyperbolically, at times, the only good player on this defense, what he was able to do in that sense is really, really impressive. And it is a real testament to like the skill, the motor, the work ethic that this guy has. But he is a game changer all on his own on that defense. And I'm interested to see what he does now with Christian Watkins as the man in the middle, getting some pressure from there. I think that's a really interesting tandem that they have. But he himself is an absolute game wrecker on the defensive line. And so I think he deserves to be in this spot. At number 9, it is TJ Watt. You see how important he was to this defense when they lost him last season and they just couldn't stop anything. And it ended up kind of just like ruining their year. I think TJ Watt is like genuinely one of the best defensive players in the league. Oddly enough, a lot of defensive players on this list. But again, he is someone who insane athletic gifts combined with a ridiculous work ethic has led him to be someone who, again, just on his own can be a game wrecker. At number 8, it is Chris Jones. He reestablished this in the postseason last year, and really throughout the season last year. He was on a mission to get that new contract. He gets it. It is very deserving, and he is the anchor for a team that really built itself up on the defense last year. So Chris Jones gets it. At 7, it's Trent Williams. There will probably be a time where he isn't on this list. That is not this year. He is so important on the offensive line in what they are doing out in San Francisco, giving whatever quarterback they have time and giving some run lanes to Christian McCaffrey. So Trent Williams gets on this list. At 6, it is Justin Jefferson. He is not going as the first wide receiver in NFL drafts or fantasy football drafts because of the quarterback situation around him. But I don't think there is a question that he is the most talented wide receiver in the National Football League right now. At 5, it is Christian McCaffrey. We have seen now what health was denying us of at times because he was oft injured as someone of his size and stature may be, but he has been able to really maximize his gifts out in San Francisco and can kind of just do it all. Pass catching, excellent as a runner as well. He is such a dynamic weapon that I almost feel like we don't appreciate it enough how good he is. as a running back. At 4, it is the MVP, Lamar Jackson. He moves way up on this list. I thought it was more coaching and game planning that cost them in the AFC Championship game, but this is still someone who has taken some great leaps in his career. The running aspect of it, a lot of people do it now. No one does it as well as him, and I think he has made some really great strides as a passer as well. So he comes in at number 4 on this list. At number 3, this was a real close battle between 3 and 2. It was Myles Garrett. He is such a freak on the defensive line and just gets after the pass rusher so well. Phenomenal in the run stopping. Just everything you want. He just checks all of those boxes. At 2, it's Micah Parsons. There isn't a whole lot that separates them. I think Parsons just being a touch quicker while still being about as ferocious a pass rusher gives him the edge for me. But if you wanted to flip them, I don't really have much of an argument. And in at number 1, I know he didn't get it on the NFL list, but to me, I don't think there's any question. Like when I start to make this list, I put Patrick Mahomes at number 1, and then I fill out the rest after that. He is the most talented quarterback I have seen in the history of the NFL. Again, like makes all the throws, mobile as heck, reads defenses so well, and he has this brilliant mix of creativity, intelligence, and athletic ability. And obviously has put the work in to maximize all of it. I think it is clear he is the best player in the NFL this season. Here are the teams with the most talent in the NFL going into the 2024-2025 season. Again, I'm not saying that these are the teams that are going to win the Super Bowl. Injuries happen, chemistry, whatever, schedule, all of that. But when you just put it down on paper, who's got the best? At 5, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. Having Patrick Mahomes helps us out greatly, obviously. They are a number 1 receiver away from probably being number 1 on this list. But Pacheco is developing. Rashee Rice didn't have the best offseason, that's for sure, but it is a talented football player when able to do so. But I think the real thing that puts these guys still on this list is the talent of this defense. When you have Chris Jones, again, in that top 10, when you have Trent McDuffie and some of these other guys, that this defense really helped get this team over the hump last year and kind of kept them around in the regular season. Not that there was much of a push from the Raiders or the Broncos or certainly the Chargers last year, but kept these guys as one of the like upper echelon teams while the offense was figuring some stuff out. And then by the time they got to the postseason, it was wraps for everyone. So they come in at number 5. At 4, it's the Philadelphia Eagles. They obviously lost some last year on the defensive side, but I think they had a very, very good draft. They made some smart moves this offseason, and so they keep that talent up on the defensive side. I think that the offensive line loses quite a bit with no Jason Kelce, but still has a couple of the best offensive linemen in the league. And then to add Saquon Barkley to an already ridiculously talented skill position set to go along with the incredibly talented Jalen Hurts, this is still a very talented team. And if they put it together, they should be there at the end. Just ahead of them, never thought I'd see them on this list, the Detroit Lions. I was admittedly a Lions non-believer last year and kept that up all the way to the AFC Championship game where I was eventually proven right. But I think there is a slight bit of projection with Jameson Williams in here, but even if not, Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Gibbs, as the skill position players are tremendous. On the offensive line, Penei Sewell is dealing with some injury issues now, but this is probably the best O-line in the NFL. Aiden Hutchinson is a legitimate game breaker on the defensive side. And then I think a couple of smart moves in the draft and over the last couple of years in building up this defense. It's not an elite defense, I don't think by any stretch, but it is, I think, good enough to get this team on this list. At 2, it's the Miami Dolphins. They lost a lot this offseason, but they had a lot this season. And you still have Devon Achane, who is primed to take a big step this year. Tyreek Hill, who I don't like saying nice things about, but is what he is. Jalen Waddle as well. It's wild to me that Waddle is the 3rd fastest guy on this team. I think people are really underestimating Tua. The issue is the offensive line for sure, but then the defense just got hurt last year, and that really was what ended up costing them. They were a like division winner last year if everyone on that defense doesn't get hurt. Now they are back for a full season. You would presume some health, and so I think the defense again is something that kind of puts them over the hump here. But at number one, it's the San Francisco 49ers, and they got an insane amount of injury luck a season ago. And that certainly helps things greatly when you are building a championship team. But the offensive weapons are the best in the NFL. The offensive line is one of the best in the NFL. And defensively, they have playmakers and game wreckers across the board. Like they're just, they check every box that you would want. And so to me, the San Francisco 49ers are absolutely the most talented team in the NFL this season. All right, it is time to continue our preview for the NFL season as we look ahead to the 2024-2025 campaign. And this one, we are starting to get a bit more into the projection aspect of things. The first couple, looking back at last year, the part one today was looking a little bit at like just a bit more matter of factly, like who are the best teams, who are the best players. Now let's project some stuff. So players who have a chance to really, who I think will really break out this season. At 5, Patrick Queen. I said this is the best free agent signing this offseason. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I think, get a real one in Patrick Queen and help them build a defense that if TJ Watt gets hurt, can still sustain a little bit. I think this is going to be a year that everyone recognizes who Patrick Queen really is. At 4, it's J.K. Dobbins. He is going to be the most talented running back on a run-heavy team, probably, with the LA Chargers. I hope he doesn't get a workhorse workload or anything like that. But injuries have really denied us of getting to see what J.K. Dobbins can do. And I understand, assuming he's going to be the guy who he was at Ohio State is asking a lot of someone whose lower body has just been decimated from injuries. But I still think there is going to be a very talented running back there. And I think that this is a guy, there's obviously health concerns if you're drafting him in fantasy, but from a real life NFL standpoint, he is going to be someone who I think has a real chance of breaking out in 2024. Another running back just ahead of him, Tyjae Spears. I think it is insane that people think Tony Pollard is going to be the number one running back in Tennessee. Spears is infinitely better than Tony Pollard is. And I think he is really poised to break out and show everyone that he can be a true weapon for the Tennessee Titans. They are not going to be the Derrick Henry run team of the last half decade or so, and that's fine. I think Tyjae Spears is still going to be a guy who is going to put up some really big numbers. And from a fantasy standpoint, this guy could be an absolute standout for fantasy that you could get in the late rounds. So I think opportunity is going to suggest this guy is going to really put it together. At 2, it is Jameson Williams. I have been saying for years that there is an insane amount of talent in this guy. And he breaks off a big play in the NFC title game. And that just kind of solidified, like, yeah, that this guy, I think this guy is going to get it. And I think now having a full training camp, a full season to really unleash things with the Detroit Lions, I think he opens up something in this offense that they just truly haven't really had before, in terms of like his big playability. Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the best receivers in the league. But Jameson Williams, in terms of like being able to take a top off a defense and all those type of cliches, I think he really will show people that there has been a lot of talent there. And if they can really unlock it in Detroit, it could be a special season for the Lions. And the number one breakout player for 2024-2025 is Christian Watson. Watson is a guy who is like, again, injuries have kind of slowed him up a little bit in the first few years out in Green Bay. But the thought that all those receivers are close in talent might be true for the rest of them. When Christian Watson is healthy, Christian Watson is the guy. And I think he will show this year, again, that this is a player that has such a well-rounded skill set. And I think he will be able to show that. And again, a couple of these are based on health for sure. I mean, all of them are. It's football, right? But this is absolutely a player who I think we see receivers take these jumps year 1 to year 2, and then year 2 to year 3 for sure. I think he is someone who is primed with a good chemistry with his young quarterback and Jordan Love to take a gigantic step forward here in 2024. We continue our 2024 NFL season preview, looking at the teams that could go from worst to first into the 2024-2025 season. It's weird, it's unpredictable at times, but there's sometimes, and honestly, generally, some teams that make that jump from worst to first. We saw the Houston Texans make that incredible rise a season ago. So, who has the opportunity to do it this year? There's only one that really strikes me in the AFC, and that is the Cincinnati Bengals. And this is 100% cheating, because they were in worst, A, in the best division in football, and B, with one of the best quarterbacks in football, just not in the lineup basically all season long, whether it be literally or in his most effective form. But now Joe Burrow is back. There is a lot of conversations around the receivers. You lose Joe Mixon. I think Brown is going to be quite good. This offensive line still has some question marks. Like this isn't a stone cold lock for sure. But with Joe Burrow back, he has led this team to within one drive of the Super Bowl before. I think he is absolutely capable of doing that again with this group. But there are a lot of questions, but with Joe Burrow back, he certainly hides a lot of problems out in Cincinnati. Moving into the NFC, Chicago absolutely could. They really loaded up on the offensive side. The defense could be a bit of an issue, but there's obvious straight lines you can draw between them and the Houston Texans from a season ago. If Caleb Williams really is that dude, then this could be one of those types of years for the Chicago Bears. And then like the Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love had one good year. Is there a bit of a fall off there? The Detroit Lions, I think they made my most talented teams list, but is there an injury or whatever? Like they will need probably quite a bit to go right in their favor to make this leap, but they certainly are available to be that banana peel that other teams slip on out in the NFC. And then the last one on this list, so a brief list, a quick one, but the Arizona Cardinals. You have a full year of Kyler Murray. You have drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. McBride is there. Connor is not the sexiest of weapons, but he is still a weapon. They draft Trey Benson as well. DeMarcado was an interesting kind of change of pace type of a player. Again, defensively, this team isn't a whole lot to write home about, but this could be a good offensive team. And when you look at their division, there is a very real possibility that something big goes wrong for San Francisco this year because everything went right last year. The Rams look wildly unimpressive, and the Seattle Seahawks should be good, but are we all just going to bank on Geno Smith not falling off of a cliff again this year? Who's to say? And especially with a new coach out there, who knows what's going on out in Seattle. And so, again, there could be a path open for the Arizona Cardinals to actually make a bit of a push. They are a very interesting team to me. I will say that as we get ready for the 2024 season. So those are the teams that I think have the best chance of making that jump from worst to first in the NFL this year. All right. So let's bounce into the NFL season preview, looking at overvalued teams for the NFL this season. And this was honestly a bit of a more difficult list than I thought it was going to be. So let's work through it. At number 5, I have the LA Rams. I just think when you look at losing Aaron Donald, relying on the health of Matthew Stafford, who is getting up there, of Cooper Kupp, who is getting up there and has been injured before, when you're relying on young players to, in Puka Nakua's case, keep up record paces, and Kyron Williams to keep up a breakout year from a year before. I just feel like when you are looking at a team at 8.5 wins, you are looking at best case scenario from this for this season. And so that's why I think that the LA Rams are one of the more overvalued teams in the NFL this season. Coming in at number 4, it is the Chicago Bears at 9.5 wins. I think this is a wildly improved team from a season ago. I think that they have really, well, maybe I shouldn't even say that. That they have added in the passing game quite a bit. They are looking to improve on the defense for sure, and I do think that they started to do that a little bit last year. But I also think that this was a team, like their big move obviously is Caleb Williams over Justin Fields. I don't think Justin Fields played all that bad last year, and they still only got to 7 wins. And so I think that there is maybe a little bit more improvement being assumed than at the quarterback spot than is actually realistic. And so I think Caleb Williams could have a great season, and you could feel really good about things, and this team could still go 7-10. But it'll still feel like a step in the right direction out in Chicago. At working our way up in the three spot, we have the New York Jets. Again, my entire basis on this is I don't think Aaron Rodgers is that good. And I get they did not have good quarterback play last year, but I thought Aaron Rodgers was kind of more on the cooked side going into last year anyway. And so now coming off of a very debilitating injury and trying to get everything sorted around that, and a year older and everything like that, I just don't see it. And I understand the rest of this roster is really good. I just don't see that that this Jets team is going to take that step here this year. I'm more out on the coach than I thought I was going to be. And I'm way more out on Aaron Rodgers than I think everyone else is. So that's why I think this team still goes under this number. Sticking in that division, sorry. Sticking in that division, the Buffalo Bills, as they come in at 10.5. You look at the injury that they have to Milano on that defense. They obviously lose Stephon Diggs and don't replace him with anyone. Sean McDermott, it felt like he kind of lost that team last year anyway, and like with the leaks about the 9/11 stuff and all of that. And so I just feel like it is all kind of compounding for this to be a down year for the Buffalo Bills. Maybe even still a playoff team. Like we hit this one if they get 10 and go 10-7 and make the playoffs. That could still win this division. But I just feel like it's just like hit after hit after hit after hit piling up on this Buffalo Bills team. And then the most overvalued team, I think, the San Francisco 49ers. They got everything going their way last year. And now you look at the Brandon Ayuk situation, which looks like it's going to carry over into the regular season. You have like just a ton of injury luck last year, and now Christian McCaffrey is feeling a little bit banged up. Ow. All right. Well, apparently she disagrees with my San Francisco 49ers one. For those of you who don't know, my cat started to slip there. For those of you listening, sorry, my cat started to slip there and then panicked and nipped my face. Anyway, the San Francisco 49ers coming in as my most overvalued team. I just like the Christian McCaffrey thing, hamstring issue here in training camp. I feel like is a big concern, and I just feel like this is another one where everything went right last year. Super Bowl hangovers are a thing, and I think they're going to take a step back for this upcoming season. So those are my overvalued teams. What about the overvalued players? Let's take a look from a fantasy football standpoint. These are the most, in my opinion, most overvalued players here in fantasy. At number 5, Malik Neighbors at 46th overall, wide receiver 23. I think that this is a very talented player. He is a rookie. And I think all of he's the only guy in this offense is going to, I think, hinder him. Because I think a lot of teams very quickly are going to realize like, oh, he's the only one we have to defend. And Daniel Jones is throwing him the football. And so I don't know how much is going to be there in way of opportunities. You can tell my cat jumped back up on the desk now, can't you? For those watching. I just don't think there's going to be that many prime opportunities for him to really have a big season. So he is my fifth most overvalued player. At 4, it's Stephon Diggs. He has right now, according to Fantasy Pros, 38th overall and wide receiver 19. I think he's the very clear number 3 receiver on the Houston Texans. And yes, this is a explosive offense, or it was a season ago. But this is also a offense with 2 guys who CJ Stroud feels very comfortable with in Tank Dell and Nico Collins. And you now have Joe Mixon, who I think can be effective out of the backfield. And if not him, Dameon Pierce, who can still do something out of that backfield. You also have Dalton Schultz there as a tight end. Like I feel like you have a lot of weapons that Stroud is already comfortable with. Not that Diggs is going to have like a 200-yard season or anything like that, but I don't know, like to have it 38th overall. So that's what we're going in around the 4th round right now. Way too high. Like wide receiver 2, I guess it's all right. Like wide receiver 19, so he is going as a wide receiver 2 fringe flex. So maybe overvalued is a bit of an overstatement, but I feel like this is a guy who should be way further back in drafts right now than he is. At 3, it's Rachaad White, 32nd overall, RB13. I think a lot of people are very excited that he is one of the few backs in the league that just has the backfield on lockdown and feels comfortable being able to just roll with that. I don't think he's very good. I think this offense might take a bit of a step back this season from what they were a year ago. And I think that you're going to see like, oh, well, who else is going to be back there? Well, we've said that about a lot of guys. And then all of a sudden, Devin Singletary is getting 10 touches a game. And we're wondering what the fuck's going on. I don't know who the other one is in Tampa Bay, but I just don't think that Rachaad White is all that good. And so because of that, I think that his opportunities will be a bit more limited this season. Coming in at number 2, I have Marvin Harrison Jr., 16th overall, wide receiver 9. I'm going to have a couple real good running backs if I'm taking him as my number 1. And I think he's incredibly talented. I think he is like cornerstone of the franchise. 3 years from now, we're talking about him as the best receiver in football. But he hasn't played it down yet. And we're talking like 16th overall. So middle part of the second round, wide receiver 9. So odds are he's your wide receiver 1. For a guy who like I think very highly of Kyler Murray. And he's going to come up on some of these fantasy previews a little bit later on for sure. Not the most sturdy fellow always, right? So I worry that with this ranking, you are baking in zero risk. Or zero of the risk that is going in and just looking at the best case scenario, which could happen, but I don't see it. And at number 1, Puka Nacua, 14th overall, wide receiver 8. So kind of the same area here as Marvin Harrison. He did it last year and was great. But I do think you look at like either Cooper Kupp could be healthier this year and take a little bit more of that. I think there's a very real risk that Matthew Stafford just isn't as good and will start to fall off a little bit here at some point. And I don't, like I said before in the overvalued teams, I don't think the Rams are going to be all that good this year. And so while Puka Nacua could be the truth and might be that talented, I just think, I don't know if he is good enough yet to make up for kind of the world around him crumbling, as I kind of expected to do with the LA Rams this year. So that is why I have him as my most overvalued player in fantasy football this season. Nothing is always quicker than I think it's going to be. The NFL season, just about here. Our previews continue today as we look at the why do I keep screwing this up? The undervalued teams and the undervalued players. Teams from a betting standpoint, players from a fantasy standpoint. So let's begin. Undervalued, we have the Miami Dolphins. Their over-under sits at 9.5. And I mentioned before, they are a team that I'm worried I am wrong about. They lost a lot. Admittedly, they lost a lot. In terms of players. And also at the end of the season, they lost a lot of games, and that cost them a division. I think if they don't have that real collapse at the end of the year, we are viewing this team quite a bit differently. They still have a track team on offense. And Tua, for some of his faults, still gets the ball out very, very quickly. And their home field advantage is still an advantage. And defensively, they were really banged up last year, and they lose Christian Wilkins to the Raiders, and that hurts them. But they replace him with Calais Campbell, who's fine. I don't think that this team takes a gigantic step back. And I think, honestly, like when you look at the division, the Patriots aren't going to do anything. And the Buffalo Bills are probably a little bit worse than they were last year. Yes, the Jets might be a little bit better. But I think the Dolphins, I think people are just sleeping on them right now. And so I think at 9.5, like the thought of this team, 9-8, it certainly seems within a realm of possibilities. But I'm real, like 10 wins. 10-7 is all I need to get over on this. Yeah, I will take the over on Miami. Coming in at 4, the Minnesota Vikings. They won 7 games last year, and they basically had me playing quarterback. Now, like Sam Darnold is not anything to write home about. I do think he's better than what they had a season ago, though. And I do think that growth, incremental that it may be, is just enough to get Justin Jefferson to be good, and that's probably enough to win 8 games. Now, the one thing, this division is expected to be good. The Bears are, I think, going to be an improved team. The Packers, I think, could take another step forward, and the Lions could make it to the Super Bowl. So this division is going to be tough, and that is where it could become a little bit challenging for Minnesota to maybe get over this number. But I think with adding Aaron Jones and adding a bit of a dynamic piece to this passing game, Addison doesn't sound like there's going to be a suspension. And Justin Jefferson is the best receiver in the league. So I think that offense is going to be enough to at least win them a few of these games and get us over that number. At 3, the Tennessee Titans. Their total's at 6.5. A lot of people sleeping on the Titans, I think. Will Levis was not good last year, but I feel like a lot of that was offensive line related. Now, I don't think this kid's going to come out and be Tom Brady or anything like that, but I think he's going to be serviceable. And they've added a few veteran weapons around him. I'm not a big Tony Pollard fan, but I think Tyjae Spears is great anyway. Dustin Hopkins, wow. Nuke Hopkins is quite good. Calvin Ridley as a 2 is fine. But the main thing is that they have invested high draft capital on offensive linemen in the last 2 years. If that hits, these guys might actually be all right. And defensively, they were awful last year. And losing Mike Vrabel is not a notch in our favor for sure. But they added quite a few veteran pieces to this defense that I think are going to help kind of raise the floor of it a little bit. The 85 Bears, this will not be. But this is going to be, I think, a serviceable defense, which I do think is an improvement over what they've had there the last couple of years. So I actually think that there is quite a bit of room for Tennessee to go over this number at 6.5. Another team, number 2 on our list, the Arizona Cardinals, also at 6.5. This defense was one of the least talented defensive units that you had in the NFL last year. They have at least added some serviceable pieces to that defense. They have also are also going to face, I think, a easier schedule when it comes to offenses that they play this year. And then on the offensive side, it was kind of Trey McBride and nothing. Kyler Murray came back mid-season and was tremendous. So getting a full season of him with McBride, you add Harrison, who does feel kind of ready-made as a wide receiver, and you allow this team to kind of grow into that. I just feel like they're, with a couple of running backs as well that you like in Benson, DeMarcado, and then obviously Connor, I feel like there are some pieces here that this team, I'm not going to say like Cinderella run or anything like that, but I don't think this is going to be one of the worst teams in the league this year. I really don't. So I think Arizona very much undervalued right now at 6.5. And the number 1 team that I think is being underrated or undervalued or whatever you want to put is the Green Bay Packers at 9.5 wins. They had such a lack of talent on the defensive side of the football and such a lack of talent as a defensive coordinator. They have now brought in, I think, an improvement on as a defensive coordinator. They've brought in some better players on the defensive side as well. And I think we are assuming Jordan Love in a second season here as a starter, there's going to be some maturing to his game. Some maturing needs to happen. He was incredibly talented, but he got better as that season went on last year. And he still made some dumb mistakes, and we saw that in the playoffs. If he can correct some of that, I think you're going to see some real talent jumps in some of these wide receivers and help this team grow. I think the world of the Lions this year. I think the Packers could win this division. That's how good I think this team is. They can make a real run this year. And so I have the Green Bay Packers as my most undervalued team in the NFL this season. Shifting gears to fantasy football. Looking at the most undervalued players now in fantasy. Let's start at number 5. Chase Brown, 105th overall, RB 36. This is a kid who I think flashed a lot of potential in his time last year. And now you are telling me that all he has to do to get the lion's share of carries in his backfield is beat Zach Moss. I feel pretty good about that. I think Chase Brown has a real opportunity to become the 1A in this backfield. But even then, I think one of the things that is really interesting to me this year is, like, we don't have dominant high-level running back. Like we have dominant high-level running backs, but not in the way we did with Adrian Peterson, where he's getting 1 billion carries a game and all of that. Everything is a timeshare now, with very few exceptions. ETN out in Jacksonville is one that comes to mind. But for the most part, it's a lot of splits. And I feel like the perceived back half of those splits are being really undervalued this year. And I think the first two on this list, Chase Brown here, and then the next one, Raheem Mostert at 77th overall and RB25, I think they are both being significantly undervalued. I think Mostert is going to start the season as the 1A. Now, we all expect Devon Achane to be incredible. But he was last year, and Mostert still led the league in touchdowns. That's probably not going to happen, but I feel like you are baking in all of the potential downside and almost none of the upside in Raheem Mostert. If you're getting him at RB25, that's your third running back. I'm very, very comfortable with him as my RB3. Coming in at number 3, and honestly, it's a quarterback that I have even overlooked when we've been doing these mock drafts. It's Jordan Love, 72nd overall, quarterback 9. You look at all the weapons he has to play around with in Green Bay. It is another year of him in this offense. It is another year of him maturing as a quarterback and kind of figuring out what throws to make, what throws not to make, and try to limit some of those. And again, he got better as that season went on last year. And so I think a full season coming off of that development, off of all that learning, with a number of young receivers kind of maturing with him, I think is really going to do wonders for this kid's fantasy stock this year. So I have him as one of the more undervalued players this year. At 2, it's Deebo Samuel, 26th overall, wide receiver 13. Even if Brandon Ayuk does stay, Deebo Samuel is just one of those guys that San Francisco just wants to get the ball in the hands of and let him do some stuff. I think this is one of the most talented players in the NFL. He is absolutely one of my favorite players to watch, and you see the Raiders jersey behind me. That is not an easy thing to have come out of my mouth, given the rivalry with these two organizations. But he is genuinely one of my favorite players to watch. And so there is some bias, but he is someone they can use in so many ways. And if Ayuk isn't there, I think that does kind of expand his opportunities. And even if Ayuk isn't there, it draws some attention. Either way, Deebo Samuel is so tough to defend and so tough to bring down and part of a very creative and dynamic offense. I don't know why things have shifted away from viewing Deebo Samuel as one of the more talented players in the league. And at number 1, it's Isaiah Pacheco. We talked before about how there are very few like one-man gangs in running backs. Isaiah Pacheco is about as close as it gets. There's going to be, it's Andy Reid. There's going to be 8 guys you've never heard of before taking opportunities away from Isaiah Pacheco at times, but he is so talented and the 1A in an Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes offense. That gets you the 3rd overall pick some years. The fact that he's going to be going as an RB2 right now and at 24th overall is astounding to me. So I think there is some great value in being able to get Pacheco, who again, maturing, developing, is kind of hitting what is shockingly enough the peak of a running back. I think that there is a lot to be excited about with Isaiah Pacheco, and so that is why he is my most undervalued player in fantasy this year. While very confident in all of that, there's admittedly some stuff that I'm just a little concerned about. So here are 5 things in the NFL and in fantasy that I am just worried that I'm wrong about this year. Coming in at number 5, the impact and the losses of the Ravens and the Dolphins. I haven't officially put together my team standing predictions just yet. That's going to be after Labor Day weekend out here. But I still have the Ravens and Dolphins rated quite highly in their divisions. And I do admit that part of it might just be whistling past the graveyard. But with the Ravens, it's Lamar and it's the institutional knowledge they have out there in Baltimore that I think that this can still be a well-managed, well-put-together football team. And on the Dolphins, I think that there is maybe a little bit too much to a hate. I understand that this team has a tough schedule and they did not do well against tough schedules a year ago. But I think McDaniel is a very smart coach, and I think they have a ton of weapons around there. And I think defensively they did lose a little bit, but Wilkins, I think very highly of. By the way, we have a new Raider podcast coming out. We'll get to that in a bit. But Christian Wilkins leaving, that hurts. Replacing with Calais Campbell softens the blow a touch. They got really banged up on defense in the last part of the season. And I think that is where the wheels started to fall off for Miami last year, was all the injuries they had on the defensive side of the football. And so that is why I think, yes, they lost some pieces, but I do think that they've replaced them well and now have some replacements coming back from injury. That's going to kind of offset it a little bit. But all of that to say, Baltimore loses Patrick Queen on defense. I said that's the biggest free agent move of the offseason, going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. That stings. And they lost a bit on the offensive line and lost their defensive coordinator. So like those losses could be just insurmountable. And in Miami, like I said, like maybe Calais Campbell is just done and Christian Wilkins isn't all that great. And they lost on the offensive line. And Tua is the best in the league at getting the ball out very, very quickly, but teams are going to recognize that. And do they adjust to it? And so I could just be totally off on both of them, and I'm really worried about that. At 4, it's the fall off of the Rams. If you are listening to this show in full, you will know that I am rather down on the LA Rams this year. But Sean McVay is a very good coach. And if everyone is healthy, this is still a really talented football team. I do think the defense lost too much to overcome, but we have seen players come out of nowhere all the time and make some surprises. And so like for a couple of different predictions I have for this upcoming season, I kind of need the Rams to not be good. And that I could just be absolutely wrong on that, and I'm worried about it. At 3, it is the impact of Sam Darnold on Justin Jefferson. In the mock drafts, and we're doing another one here in a little bit on the full episode, I have been avoiding Justin Jefferson rather aggressively, I would say. And I just don't think Sam Darnold, who has been a below average quarterback almost every second he's been out on an NFL field. And I was a Sam Darnold believer for longer than most. But I just think that this offense is going to take a hit this year. And also they're going to have a better running game. Like Aaron Jones, I think is going to take up some of the opportunities in this whole thing as well. And so Justin Jefferson, I still think he's the most talented receiver in the league, but I just think Sam Darnold is going to be the opposite of the rising tide that raises all ships. He is going to be the dried up tide that crashes the ship. That being said, Justin Jefferson is just awesome. And Sam Darnold at least can be competent at times. And so maybe I am overvaluing the quarterback position and how much that affects Justin Jefferson. Although we did just see that last year, but I do think Darnold is better than everyone they had playing a quarterback a year ago. So I could very well be wrong on that and be making some real mistakes in the first rounds of some of these drafts. At 2, the reliance of the Jets on Aaron Rodgers. I said in the overvalued teams portion, I think Aaron Rodgers is cooked. And I think because of that, it is going to hold the New York Jets back. Maybe my overall thing that I'm worried about is just the Jets in general. Because I have a different team winning the division. I have the Jets missing the playoffs, and I'm probably going to go Jets under on the win total as well. I just think Aaron Rodgers, the last time we saw him, he wasn't that good. And now it's coming off of an Achilles injury. And all of those things just building up onto it. Again, this is a talented team. And so that's where I think the wrong comes from. I don't think I'm going to be wrong on Aaron Rodgers. I don't think this is going to be a good year. That's not the one I'm worried about. The part that I'm worried about being wrong on is that this team doesn't need him. Like, even if he is dog shit, they are just the Broncos with Peyton Manning in his last year. And they have enough guys that Rodgers can float the ball out there, catch it, and make plays. And then a defense that can go out and shut you down. Robert Saleh, defensive-minded head coach, be able to lock these things down. And they 13-10 their way to a championship. That is the part that I am really worried I'm wrong about with this Jets team. And at number 1, this one's a pure fantasy one, but I have based almost my entire fantasy draft strategy this year off of getting 1 or 2 of Christian Watson, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Jameson Williams in the mid to late rounds and being able to build up my wide receiver depth that way. And if I'm off on them, that sets back my fantasy season, probably irreparably, quite frankly, because of how I'm banking on using things in the beginning part of my rounds and what I am then hoping for after them in these drafts. But those are the guys that I'm like, I need to get a couple of them. And like Christian Watson, it's the opposite of well, who else are they going to throw to? They have everyone to throw to. And I think Watson's the best of them. And I think that will shine through eventually with this team. Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think that offense just sucked last year. I think that they were used very inefficiently. And I think he is going to be a player that is going to be able to elevate here with better play calling and another just year in the league and getting comfortable. And Jameson Williams, I have said for a while, this kid is so talented. I think he is an absolute game breaker. We just haven't been able to see it because he's been an idiot. And that's one where it's like, I can't quantify for idiot. What I see is an incredible wide receiver who I think could be a wide receiver one in this league. We just haven't seen it enough because, again, he's been an idiot. And so I greatly worry that I am just wrong on all three of those guys because of how I have set up my fantasy football this season. So there you go. Every year, there are we very rarely go, okay, well, 14 teams made the playoffs last year. Those same 14 get in this year. And so today, I'm going to look at the teams that I think who were in the playoffs last year who won't be, and the teams that weren't last year who will be. We will start with teams who were in, who I now think are out. At number 3, it's the LA Rams. I've talked about how I'm a little bit like the things that I'm worried about being wrong about. They're one. They're absolutely one. Because I am fully out on the LA Rams right now. I think the quarterback is a year older and kind of winding down. Same thing with Cooper Kupp. I think losing Aaron Donald on the defensive line is a real problem for this team that was already kind of just barely keeping it between the white lines on the defensive side of things anyway. And so now you lose Aaron Donald. That doesn't help anything. And I think it causes some really, really big problems. And then you are relying on 2 young kids who had probably the best season of their careers, relying on them to do that again. And that would concern me greatly. And I'm not just saying the best season of their careers up to this point. Obviously, last year was the best and worst season Puka Nacua has ever had in the NFL because it's the only one he's had in the NFL. I'm saying, I don't know if he replicates that at any point in his career. And that's not a shot at him. That was just a really, really good year. And so I feel like there is the potential that this thing kind of nosedives a little bit out there. At 2, Cleveland. They had the best defense in the NFL. They ran through 4 quarterbacks and somehow still made it into the postseason with that. And the defense is still probably going to be really, really good. But if it takes a step back from being elite to bordering on all-time great, I don't think the offense is good enough to make up for it. With no Nick Chubb, although that was an issue last year, with Deshaun Watson, who kind of looks like he just sucks now. I don't see a path where this team is going to be that good again this year. So they are out for me. And at number 1, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. I love the offseason that they had right up until we get to the quarterback. And honestly, I like half of the quarterback moves that they made. I think Justin Fields fits there great. I think Russell Wilson is kind of cooked. And it just feels like something where they're going to hold on to this one maybe a little bit too long. And I don't think they're going to be able to get this team to where they need to get to. Also, we are assuming a great deal of health with Cincinnati, of course. But I don't think Pittsburgh is going to be able to step back into that playoff role this year and really make that push again. So those are the teams that I have out. So who do I have moving in? Now, these lists are unbalanced, and they shouldn't be because, I'm saying 3 come out, so 3 should go in, but I'm saying 4 should go in. Kind of to hedge my bets, but whatever, it's my show. Fuck off. Out of the playoffs last year in this year, at 4, and the reason they're at 4 is I'm not firmly 100%, yeah, let's go. I got Arizona. I think, I just talked about how I don't think the Rams are going to be all that good. I've talked about how I think San Francisco maybe falls off a little bit. And Seattle, I do think they are going to be better this year. I think a lot of aspects of their team are going to be improved. But I feel like Arizona, going from having one of the worst defenses in the NFL history last year, they at least have competent players on the defensive side of things. A full season of Kyler Murray coming back with Marvin Harrison, with another year of McBride. You have Benson and Connor that you trust in the backfield. DeMarcado can kind of change things up a bit as well. This feels like a relatively competent football team in a division that I think might open up for them a little bit. And so I think Arizona has a chance to get into the playoffs this year. At 3, it's Atlanta. We made actually quite a bit of money last year on betting against the Atlanta Falcons. And frustratingly not enough because they still won a few games. But they where everyone's pick just, oh, well, everyone else in this division sucks. And we had that Tampa Bay ticket, and that will go down as one of the best plays we've had here on Couch Potato Diary in our existence so far. But I do think now Atlanta, whether it's Penix or Cousins, they have competent quarterback play. They have made some really good moves to shore up this defense in training camp. Getting Judon, I think, is going to have a real impact on things. Simmons as well, I think, is going to really help out this defense. I think the Falcons are actually a good football team this year, and so I do think they get in. At 2, this has been a trendy pick for people to go against. I have Jacksonville. They were the top team in this division. And then Trevor Lawrence got hurt and he tried to play through it. And so I think that is skewing people's perception of him a little bit. But you still have one of the better running backs in the league in ETN. I wish they would have done a little bit more to shore up this receiver room. But if Brian Thomas turns into a guy, then I think all of a sudden everyone starts to stack up a little bit better than you would think. I think Ingram is fine as a tight end. Defensively, Josh Allen, who added another name onto it, I forget what it is, I apologize, I'm sorry, kind of anchors this defense that's really good. Now, I do think Doug Peterson can be a touch overrated at times. And it has seemed like the longer he's in a place, the worse it gets. And so that there's a bit of a concern there. But I think a lot of people are just saying, oh yeah, Jackson, whatever, the Houston Texans division to do whatever win. And I think actually every team in this division is maybe a little bit more dangerous than people think. But I think Jacksonville is right at the tippy top of that list. I think they are actually going to be a decent football team this year. And at number 1, it's Cincinnati. For some of the reasons I mentioned before, if you're watching the full episode, with Joe Burrow being like coming back, if he is actually healthy, then this team is a no doubt playoff team. They still need some help on the offensive line. I think Burrow being there is going to help this defense out substantially. And you just have an elite level quarterback, one of those guys, it's so cliche, but just knows how to win and get the most out of guys like Higgins and Chase and all of them. And so that's why it feels like a bit of a gimme to say that they should make the playoffs. But assuming health, which you never can in football, but assuming health, this team is 100% a playoff team next year. So those are the picks that I have for in and out for the NFL this season. All right, we are going to start here with the players who I think could decide the fantasy season this year. So this isn't just necessarily, oh, this guy's going to win everyone championships. It is more, if this guy hits, it has the potential to win championships. If this guy doesn't hit, it has the potential to be maybe a little bit devastating in a few different ways. Hopefully you kind of pick up on the theme as we go along, because I don't know if I'm describing it all that well. But we start at number 5, and that is Anthony Richardson. He came up really early in mock drafts, and we have another mock draft coming up today. But he has been coming up very early in mock drafts, like too early in mock drafts, and that has been a real difficult thing, because he only played in a couple of games. Looked all right. Like, there is absolutely the promise in him, but he only played a couple of games, got hurt, and was done for the season. And again, this is why I think he has the potential to decide fantasy season, because he's going as like a top, like he is going as a very firmly placed starting quarterback. And that is, like a high level. He's going ahead of Burrow. He's going ahead of Kyler Murray. He is going ahead of Jordan Love and Dak Prescott and all of those guys. And we've seen barely any games from this guy. And so I just, like, on the one hand, if everyone's right and he is that dude, then this is a guy who could potentially be a league winner. But if he is not, and I get, like, quarterback, there's a bunch of good ones out there that you can go out and try to play the streaming game. So maybe it's not as impactful, but you are using a fairly high pick on this guy, and it is, I think, very concerning a little bit to be putting that much stock into a quarterback. Like, you look at it this way. You have him going, if I'm remembering mock drafts right, like 4th, 5th round-ish, somewhere around there. Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams are going like 9th, 10th round. Anthony Richardson's played like 120 more minutes in the NFL than those guys have. So I think people are treating this as if it is a sure thing. And I think it is the furthest thing from a sure thing. And to be passing up on some of the running backs and wide receivers and tight ends going around him, if it works, it's going to be great. If not, That could be a bit of a concern. At 4, it's Kirk Cousins. Not necessarily for him. Although if he gets back to that level, that is going to be a streaming quarterback that people are able to kind of ride for a while. And he's going at the back end of drafts, or in some not even at all. And so that way you have been able to firmly solidify your roster, and then for basically free, go out and get a high caliber starter if he is that dude. But the main thing for him is he at the palm of his hands has the fantasy value of Justin Jefferson, the best receiver in football, Aaron Jones, who still I think has some life in those legs, Jordan Addison, a young receiver, bit of a rough offseason, but a young receiver who has a ton of talent. Sorry, I'm thinking these were the guys who he had all that in not Aaron Jones. Sorry, I'm getting him mixed up. But he had all of these guys last year. I'm still making a point. I just got confused on which one I'm making. He had Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson. He didn't have Aaron Jones. That was the Minnesota now. But with Alexander Madison and TJ Hawkinson. And all of those guys, Addison, maybe not so much, but like Jefferson wasn't the guy who you thought he would be, and on down the line. And so now this year, he has the fantasy in his hands of Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. All 3 going in the top 6, 7 rounds of draft. Bijan in the first, Drake London in the second. So if Kirk Cousins is just bad, then all of a sudden, or just hasn't recovered from these injuries or whatever, he has the potential to ruin a first round pick, ruin a second round pick, and ruin a top 5 tight end, all in just one fell swoop. So that is a little bit of a concern. But that being said, if he's just back, if he is the guy, then as I said before, this is a dude that you can go out and pick up and basically get for free, either in waiver wire or at the end of your drafts, and just roll with him. And if he's awesome, then Bijan might be like knocking on the door as the best player in fantasy. And Drake London at the second round could end up being a steal, given how many receivers are going ahead of him. And Kyle Pitts, again, could be a steal, given that there's, I think, 4 or 5 tight ends going ahead of him right now. So Kirk Cousins, maybe not just for him, but for how he can swing the value of these players is going to be, I think, very important to fantasy football this season. Screwed it up a little bit, but we got to the initial, the eventual point there anyway. At 3, it's Joe Burrow. Again, so many players on this offense being drafted as normal. Jamar Chase, and we've done it, and on all these mock drafts, we've ended up with Jamar Chase a lot. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, those guys are being drafted as normal. Joe Burrow continues to have some wrist problems, and they tried to limit how much he's practicing as we ramp up here toward week 1. And so as we talked about with Cousins, the value of some of these other players, but also for him, he is going as QB6 right now in a lot of the mock drafts we have done. And again, 4th, 5th, 6th round, some good players in the 4th, 5th, 6th round that you're just passing on to get Joe Burrow. If the injury situation with him isn't right, again, it is him, it is Chase, and it is T. Higgins, who are all going in the top 6 rounds of drafts right now, that could just completely tank. So again, Joe Burrow has a lot of this in his hands. We're not going to do this for everyone, because you could do that for a bunch of quarterbacks, right? But at 2, it's Jameson Williams. There is a chance, and this is more kind of a boom potential, because if and maybe I should have had Jameson Williams a little bit further down on this list, because if he doesn't hit, he's going in the 10th round. It's not going to be remarkably debilitating. But I truly believe he has the potential to be this year's Puka Nacua, where he is going either late in drafts, depending on the format. Maybe you're getting him as a waiver wire guy. Probably not. He's going early enough. But still, so it's not straight line to the Puka comparison from a year ago, but he is still going in the middle to back part of a lot of these drafts. And I truly think he is a player who has the potential to really steal seasons this year. I think he has amazing game-breaking ability, and that is why I think that he can absolutely decide a lot of fantasy seasons this year. If he just turns into a number 1 wide receiver from the 10th, 11th, 12th round, then you have an unbelievable steal and have just been able to create this dynamic offensive weapon out of nowhere. At number 1, it's Christian McCaffrey. And this one seems maybe a little bit like a cop-out, saying like, oh yeah, the guy who goes first overall has a chance to decide a lot of fantasy leagues. last year, he was so good, he was winning fantasy championships on his own. And so that is kind of the argument for taking him with the first overall pick, is that like he has the potential to just do that. That being said, he is already dealing with some injuries in camp, and basically the entire San Francisco offense is either holding out or banged up a little bit. And I have real concerns that this player is going to be able to replicate the health he had last year and the production that he had from a season ago. And if he just isn't that clear-cut number one guy, then all of a sudden you have to wait a very long time to get your second and then third pick. And you then, I think a lot of times strategically are going, well, look, a lot of really good receivers that come off the board, I kind of need to get one of them. And so, sorry. So you are kind of off, you now have invested in the running back position, but you don't want to go, okay, well, I'm just going to double up and get a second running back because I have CMC. But also, now that it has come back around and say in a 12-team league, you now have the 24th overall pick, there's odds are like 10, 11, 12 wide receivers have come off of the board. So you're not even getting one of those. And so it can just be crushing to you. But again, this is a player who has shown he has the capability of just winning fantasy championships. And so it is a really, really risky play. And look, all of them, like a bunch of first round picks last year didn't pan out. But Christian McCaffrey, I feel like this year is a real swing type of a player there. So those are the players who I think will decide fantasy football championships positively or negatively this season. All right, it is time for My Dudes. A lot of different shows call it a lot of different things, but these are My Dudes. And so these are the 5 players who I have either been targeting or just ending up with a lot in fantasy football mock drafts throughout this whole process. Coming in at number 5, it's Jameson Williams. He has landed on so many lists this year. I have said I think he is a game changer. I think he's a game breaker. I think he has incredible talent and is going to be such an important part of what the Detroit Lions are doing this year. If he turns into that guy, I think he is legitimately a league winner as a wide receiver. At number 4, it's George Kittle. It feels like a lot of people have just forgotten how good this guy can be and how good this offense can still be. He gets banged up a little bit for sure, but he is still, I think, incredibly talented and deserves to be taken amongst some of the highest tight ends in these drafts. At 3, it's Kyler Murray. Kyler showed up and played very good football down the stretch for the Arizona Cardinals. And I think now having a full training camp, having a defense that's going to be able to at least, get them on the field at some times, and also have a weapon in Marvin Harrison Jr. that's really going to help things out. And also, I think they drafted a pretty good backup to James Conner in Benson. And so I just think that this offense is better now set up for Kyler Murray to make a real push and become a legitimate fantasy star again this year. At 2, it's Christian Watson. There is a lot of buzz about this Green Bay Packers receiving room. I still think Watson is the best of all of them. And I think he has an opportunity now to kind of take that step into wide receiver 1 territory. I think we're going to be drafting him as a wide receiver 1 probably around the 2nd round this time next year. And at number 1, it's still Deebo Samuel. Ayuk gets a lot of the headlines. McCaffrey gets a lot of the headlines. Deebo gets banged up a little bit, just like George Kittle, but I think he is still legitimately one of the most talented players in the National Football League this season, with his ability to break tackles, the catch radius, and all of those things. He is just spectacular, I think, at what he does. And so that is why he is number 1 on my list of my guys, my dudes, going into the 2024 fantasy football season. Looking at a few things on the NFL preview today, we will start with coaches on the hot seat. We're also going to look at the players who are going to decide the NFL season, and we are going to look at rookies who we think will have a big impact in fantasy football this year, and we'll close with another mock draft. So coaches on the hot seat. At 5, it's Dennis Allen. No one in New Orleans likes this team. And no one in New Orleans has confidence, and no one in the NFL has confidence that Dennis Allen will be able to turn this thing around. He, I think, is a fine defensive head coach, or a defensive coordinator, sorry, but as a head coach, it's not there. And I think if this team gets off to a slow start, he will not be there for the entirety of this season. At 4, it's Doug Peterson. He has a bit of a reputation of being someone who his teams get worse the longer he stays there. Jacksonville is coming off of a really, really disappointing season, and his one job was to make sure that the best quarterback prospect we had seen in a decade turns into one of the best quarterbacks we had seen. That hasn't happened. And if that doesn't turn around this year, then I think it could be bye-bye for Doug Peterson. At 3, it's Mike McCarthy. He's a lame duck coach for an owner who loves to go out and make a big splash with Bill Belichick and Mike Vrabel just there to make that splash. And so I don't... A, I'm not high on the Cowboys this year. B, I have never been high on Mike McCarthy. I think he is genuinely one of the most overrated coaches in the history of the National Football League, and I think that he has a lot of pressure on him to turn this thing around very, very quickly and get this thing going after just an abysmal playoff loss to his former team a season ago. At 2, it's Robert Saleh. The excuses are over. Even if it's not Aaron Rodgers this year, this team has to make a stand, and this team has to improve. And it feels like the division is wide open for them. I believe they are now the betting favorites to win this division. So this has to work this year for Robert Saleh, I think, to keep his job with the Jets. And at number 1, it's Sean McDermott. After the whole 9/11 coaching thing last year, and another disappointing playoff exit, I think there was a lot of people that were assuming that there might be a new man in charge out in Buffalo. And so if, this is not a better team than the one that he coached a year ago. If they were able to, I think, save their season with a change in offensive coordinator and a change in offensive philosophy. If that doesn't lead to more success this year, I think this guy's just probably out, and that's probably it for Sean McDermott with Buffalo. So those are the coaches on the hot seat going into the 2025 season, 2024-2025 season. All right, the other day we did, or the other show, I guess, we did player or coaches on the hot seat. Today, it is players on the hot seat, as we look at some guys who really need to have big years, whether it means they're going to be gone from their current job or just gone from relevancy or whatever. These guys need a big year in 2024 and 2025. So we begin with Jerry Jeudy out in Cleveland. Everyone wanted to believe this guy was a legitimate number 1 wide receiver, and it didn't work out in Denver, and they couldn't give him away. And now all of a sudden, it feels kind of like Last Chance Saloon very early for Jerry Jeudy with the Cleveland Browns. If it works, then all of a sudden this offense could be really good. But he is in a spot where the quarterback wasn't very good last year. He is in a spot where he is not the number 1 guy, and he's kind of far from the number 1 option. He absolutely has to show that he can still be I think, productive member of an NFL offense and really show some of the potential that a lot of people saw in him. At number 4, it's Tony Pollard. The more that the process has kind of gone on this offseason, I have seen some people kind of explaining away what happened last year with Pollard as just injury, but it's crazy how quick it went from this guy needs to have the ball, this guy needs to have the ball, this guy needs to have the ball. Why are we still giving him the ball? He sucks. It just fell off a cliff for Tony Pollard. You can absolutely explain that away from injury, but this year you can't. He has to be better this year, or else it's just not going to work for him in this offense, or not even in this offense, maybe even in the if this year sucks, he could be done, quite frankly. At number 3, it's Russell Wilson. He is being paid a whole lot of money by the Denver Broncos to not be there anymore. They have taken on a record dead cap hit to just make him go away. Now he's going on a Pittsburgh Steelers team that couldn't lose if they tried, and they are turning to him as being the guy to run this offense. It has to work. If it doesn't work here, it's over. So that's another one where this isn't just like this job. This is I don't know where he goes after this if this doesn't work with him with the Pittsburgh Steelers. At 2, it's Stephon Diggs. The Buffalo offense got so much better when he got there. But last year, it got so much better when he wasn't a part of it anymore. And now he is going to a Houston Texans team that everyone views as an exciting offense and with a very exciting quarterback in CJ Stroud. If Diggs can't make it work with that guy, and this team might be done for him. And at number 1, it's Daniel Jones. The entire world knows the Giants were aggressively trying to trade into the New England Patriots spot to get their starting quarterback this year, and they couldn't. So now it is on Daniel Jones. He and everyone knows this is probably his last year with the Giants. If he wants it to be not his last year as a starting quarterback in the NFL, it has to look better. He has Malik Neighbors, but not a whole lot. He has to really ball out, I think, to give himself another opportunity to start in the NFL. So those are the players that are on the hot seat going into 2024, 2025. Players who I think could decide the NFL season. We did this in the fantasy one. Swig of water for the working man. We did this in the fantasy one. Players who could decide fantasy football. And I kind of like it. So these are the guys who I think will have a say on deciding how this NFL season goes. At 5, it's Davante Adams. I don't think he's going to be that much of a game changer on the Raiders, but if he isn't happy with how things are out in Vegas, given how many teams this year have kind of taken the fantasy football strategy of just, punt on receiver, to be able to bring this guy in for half of a season and be able to make that push at the end to try to make it into the playoffs, he could be 100. Like, if he is just not happy with the Raiders and they trade him to a Buffalo, or they trade him to I was gonna say the Chargers, that might not move the needle quite as much, but a lot of those teams that were looking at Brandon Ayuk probably going to be looking over at a Davante Adams right now, and trying to grow their team. And so if he can go to a team, he is that type of a player that I think can make a difference and kind of move the needle and get this team to get that team to where they want to get to. At 4, it's Tua. He's not getting traded, but a lot of people are down on the Miami Dolphins this year because of how last season ended. I think if Tua Tagovailoa can take another step and he can keep this Miami Dolphins offense at an elite level for the whole season, the Dolphins legitimately could win a Super Bowl. That is how good I think this team is. But I do think it all kind of comes down to how does Tua handle the pressure that is on him? How does Tua get the ball out? The offensive line took some hits this offseason. And so now how do they grow? And how does this offense continue to move? If he's nothing, then they're out of the playoffs and whatever. But if he can get this thing rolling, he absolutely could help the Miami Dolphins get to a Super Bowl. That's how good this team is. At 4, I had him in fantasy. I have to have him here. It's Jameson Williams. I think that he can be the last missing piece that this Detroit Lions offense was looking for, and he can be the guy who can kind of take off and lead this team and just add another dynamic to this offense that makes them really go from great to elite. It's the one thing they were missing, and you saw it in the NFC Championship game when he was gone. He is another big play guy. I think all the puzzle pieces are there for Detroit this year to be able to go out and make a really big splash. At 2, it's Aaron Rodgers. If he gets hurt again, or if he is just kind of as cooked as I think he is going to be, then the New York Jets are just probably going to once again fade quietly, or not so quietly, into the night. But if he's good, and he can get Breece Hall the ball in good situations, if he can get Wilson the ball in good situations, if he can let that defense get a bit of a breather every now and then this Jets team deserves to be the betting favorite in the AFC East. And they deserve to be one of the favorites to make the Super Bowl out of the AFC. That's the swing that Aaron Rodgers can have. And at number 1, it's Travis Kelce. He was kind of in fuel conservation mode a little bit last season. And I think that is going to be the case again. At some point, it's going to fall off, and I'm not saying it's going to be this year. If it is, then I think the entire Super Bowl landscape is wide open. But if he can still be one of the better tight ends and one of the better pass catchers in the National Football League, then Kansas City is just again going to be one of the favorites to go off and win the whole thing for an unprecedented 3rd time in a row. And I think a lot of it with this offense hinges on Travis Kelce. So those are, I think, some of the guys who are the most important players in the NFL this season. All right, so have done this for a few years now. Just going to run through every team, give my thoughts on their win totals, maybe a couple that we're going to click on, actually. And by the time the next episode runs, we will be looking at our Super Bowl predictions for the upcoming season. So let's get into it and start with the Chicago Bears. The Bears total sits at 9.5. They are plus 275 to win the division and plus 1,200 to win the Super Bowl. I had the Bears listed as one of my most overvalued teams in the NFL during our preview process. I think that there is a world where this Bears team is better, but also doesn't get under 9.5. Like, I think that they could be a 7-win team that feels really, really good. One of the things that concerns me a little bit is they face the projected third easiest schedule in the league. By the way, most of these stats, if not all, are from Warren Sharp's Sharp Football Analysis season preview. So that is where this is coming from. The only quarterbacks that the Bears beat last year: Bryce Young, Aiden O'Connell, Sam Howell, Josh Dobbs, Taylor Heineke, and then they did beat Kyler Murray and Jared Goff. This is a team that I think, like, they had a lot of issues across the field. It wasn't just quarterback. And yes, they went out and addressed a whole lot going on that offense by bringing in Keenan Allen, by bringing in Rome Odunze, by keeping around DJ Moore, DeAndre Swift as well. But quarterback with Justin Fields, I don't think was the biggest issue this team had. And so, yes, bringing in Caleb Williams, I think certainly will help upgrade this offense a little bit. But this team got to where they were just by, like, beating kind of bad teams last year, and not with issues with the quarterback. Overall, it was some problems on the defense and some problems on the offensive line. Let's look at the defense. Last year, the Bears defense ranked 30th in pressure rate and 31st in sacks, getting just 30 of them. They did improve to 24th in both pressure rate and sacks once Montez Sweat arrived. They are projected to face the 8th easiest schedule of offenses in the upcoming season. Also, on the offensive line, the Bears gave up 50 total sacks against what ended up being the easiest schedule of defenses in 2023. Also, they committed 54 offensive penalties and ended the year dead last in offensive penalty EPA. So yes, I do think that the defense is a little bit better. I do think that the offense is probably quite a bit better, and the schedule is probably a little bit easier. I still think to get over 9.5, this is a 10-win football team. Like, they can go 9-8, and we still get this. So I am going to go. I always keep track of these by writing it down. I am still going to go Chicago under 9.5 for the upcoming season. Up next, the Detroit Lions. Their total sits at 10.5. They are plus 140 to win the division, plus 500 to win the NFC, and plus 1,100 to win the Super Bowl. This is a team that I like quite a bit. I think that they went out and made some smart moves on the defense. They spent their first 2 picks on cornerbacks, and Terrion Arnold out of Alabama and Ennis Rakestraw out of Missouri. They go out and add DJ Reader. They traded for Carlton Davis and Amik Robertson as well. And so this is where I think Detroit grows, because last year, as you will know, I was, let's say, out on Detroit coming into this year, or going into last year, and eventually was proven right in the NFC Championship game. But I think that they made the moves that they needed to make on the defensive side to improve this football team. Overall, defensive efficiency and early down defense last year, they were 27th. They ranked 27th in the red zone. They were 30th against the pass, 31st in yards per attempt. 74% of all yards gained on the Lions were passing yards. That is the number 1 rate in the NFL. They were 3rd in the league against the run, but everyone knew you could throw on the Detroit Lions. And again, it got them to the NFC title game. I fully understand that. They also had some troubles, like, they had trouble getting to the quarterback. 5-man rush last year. Let's just, oh, right. They're, like, for stats against, with a 5-man rush, they were 32nd in EPA per attempt, which means they were last. 32nd in yards per attempt, 17th in completion rate, 30th in yards after the catch and completion, per completion, sorry. 24th in third down conversion rate. That is all against a 5-man blitz, 5+ man rush. They were second in pressure rate. They actually had a very good defense. If they hadn't blitzed at all, they would have been a top 10 defense, but they just felt they had to blitz and blitz and blitz to try to put pressure on the quarterback to save their DBs. And it just ended up really messing with them a little bit. And so the wild thing is, like, you have Aiden Hutchinson, who is a beast, and they ranked number 5 in pressure rate when not blitzing. So they were doing something they didn't need to do. I would imagine they clean some of this up. Offensively, they were obviously incredibly efficient last season. Just one of the better offenses that you will see. I think they take a step forward with Jameson Williams this year. And that's why I think the Detroit Lions are legitimately a threat to go out and win a championship. They also face an easier schedule of defenses this year. Last season, it was 17th. This season, it is projected to be 27th. So I think everything right now is really going in the Lions' favor. And so now I am on the Lions bandwagon. I like them at over 10.5. Some thought to them winning the NFC at plus 500, but we're not going to go there just yet. The Green Bay Packers, their total is 9.5. They are plus 200 to win the division, plus 700 to win the NFC, plus 800 to finish as the 1 seed in the NFC, and they were listed as one of my most undervalued teams in the NFL. The one thing that concerns me on this team is certainly the defense. That they were absolutely abysmal a season ago defensively, and that they had bad players in a poor scheme. That's a really bad fit. They got rid of their defensive coordinator. They've brought in Xavier McKinney. They drafted Javon Bullard in the 2nd round. You have McKinney, who was one of the best safeties in the league last season. That should help things out a little bit. The issue is that this defense was bad against bad offenses. They faced the 26th toughest schedule of offenses last year. They are projected to face the 2nd toughest this year. They will face 9 of 2023's top 11 toughest passing attacks, including the Niners, Dolphins, Eagles, and of course, they play the Lions twice. So this defense has to figure it out. They 100% have to. And I think they will to a certain extent. I don't think we're going to be talking about the 85 Bears, but I do think that we are going to be talking about an at least passable defense. The one thing that makes you feel pretty good is how this team grew through last season. And one of the ways they did that was pushing the ball down the field. Warren Sharp lays this out perfectly in his breakdown. Weeks 1 through 9. They 20% of first half drives featured an explosive play. That was last in the league. Week 10 onward, 59% of first half drives featured an explosive play. That is a almost 40% increase. That bumped them up to number 3. 35%, weeks 1 to 9. 35% of all drives featured an explosive play. That was 22nd in the league. Weeks 10 onward, 54% of all drives featured an explosive play. They were very aggressive in going at teams. And they were very, very aggressive in pushing the ball downfield and using what is an incredibly talented wide receiver room. From week 11 on, despite being blitzed at the number 1 rate in the NFL, Jordan Love ranked number 1 in total touchdowns, number 1 in total passing yards, number 1 in EPA per attempt, number 1 in lowest sack rate plus interception rate, number 1 in touchdown to interception ratio, number 2 in fewest interceptions, number 2 in success rate, number 2 in first down rate, number 3 in completion rate, and number 3 in third down conversion rate. This was an offense that got better as the season went along, and this was a quarterback that got better as the season went along. I love Green Bay this year. I think that plus 800 for them as the number 1 seed in the NFC is actually quite tempting. And so because of that, I am going to go Green Bay, and we are going to go over 9.5. I really do think that this is absolutely a playoff team this year. Last team in this division, Minnesota. I had them as undervalued, but the more I looked at the stats, the more I worried about it. Their total was at 7.5. They are plus 925 to win the division. The reason I'm worried about it, the Vikings are scheduled to face the 5th hardest schedule in the league this upcoming season. After they open the season against the Giants, The Vikings play the toughest schedule by far, weeks 2 through 7. Every opponent is projected to win over 9 games and make the playoffs. That is the 49ers, the Texans, the Packers, the Jets, and the Lions. They do have a net rest edge throughout the season, which as you go through it, actually, I think means quite a bit. The reason why I had hope for Minnesota is they were, I think, like not terrible last year. They had 7 wins last season. And that's with Nick Mullins playing most of their games. And even when he wasn't, like when it was Kirk Cousins, he was bad. Cousins was just dreadful, I think, all of last year at times. And I don't think this team was all that, like, I don't think what they have now is all that worse from what they had last year when they had 7 wins. The harder schedule is definitely a concern. 100% it is. And I think like this division just getting better is a concern as well. So I know I have them as one of my undervalued teams. I can't get this team to 8 wins though. So we're going to say Minnesota is an under at 7.5. Let's move to the NFC South. It is the Atlanta Falcons, who their total sits at 9.5, and they are minus 135 to win this division. I said before, I am not a big believer in Kirk Cousins. I am not a big believer in a few things on this team. New coach Raheem Morris, I thought that was a mistake. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt because I do think that he just didn't really get a fair shake in his other spots. And he seems like he has really grown up as a coach. And so I do think that will help a little bit. The one thing with this team, they are projected to face the easiest schedule in the league. And that I think is going to help them immensely. Like the rest of this division is just so bad. And I have them winning the division. I still can't get them to 10 wins, though. So I am going to go under 9.5. That is absolutely not one that we are going to be clicking on. But we have them at under 9.5. I do think Bijan Robinson has a really big year this year. I think the odds for him getting the most running yards in the league is actually pretty good. And so I think that there is some help there for Atlanta and for Kirk Cousins. I think he really grows this year. Carolina, their total is at 5.5. They are plus 900 to win the division. They have been absolutely dreadful and have been absolutely dreadful for a very long time. And I do think that maybe this team, like I think Bryce Young looks a little bit better this upcoming season. But looking at the numbers that Warren Sharp has, I didn't realize how bad it was. Of Young's 588 total dropbacks, he was not pressured on 357 of them. His performance in those, he was 44th in accuracy, 44th in yards per attempt, 41st in EPA per attempt, and 39th in success rate. And so that is very concerning, how bad he was, even under a clean pocket. And again, you look at this right now, the Panthers, the one upside to it is that they are expected to face a significantly easier schedule this year. But I don't see where the talent is on this team. I think the defense probably got significantly worse with some of the losses that they have, specifically with Brian Burns. And I don't think they improved the offense enough to help out Bryce Young. So I think this is going to be a rough year for Carolina. New Orleans Saints, their total is 7.5. They're plus 465 to win the division. I think this offense is brutal. I do not think this is a good football team. I think Derek Carr is kind of done. And again, Warren Sharp lays it out. Last year, when Derek Carr was under pressure, he was the 43rd ranked quarterback in the NFL. When the pocket was kept clean, 14th. Outside the pocket, he was 28th. Inside the pocket, 11th. Third and fourth downs, he was 35th. Early downs, he was 4th. So everything needs to be perfect for Derek Carr to go out and be good. And the offense just was not able to create that perfection for him. Defensively, I do think that Dennis Allen can coach up a pretty good defense, and adding Chase Young, I think actually will help them out defensively a little bit. But I don't think this offense is going to be good. I think that the best player on it for a long time was Alvin Kamara, and he continues to fall off a little bit. Derek Carr looks kind of done. So I actually have New Orleans, even though, again, fifth easiest schedule in the league, I have them under 7.5. Last team in this division, it is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers, they were 8-3 against teams that went under 500 last year. They went 2-7. They were 1-6 in games against teams that ranked 14th or better in total efficiency. Their win was against Jacksonville. They just had a whole lot of things work out really, really well for them. And look, we benefited off it. That was, I think, one of our best calls last season. But I just think the way that they get better is improved play calling. They had some of the worst runs last year. Rachaad White actually isn't all that good. You look at it, Tampa Bay faced the NFL's number 2 highest rate of light boxes on running back runs, getting 6 or fewer defenders in the box on 39% of running back runs. And they were still the NFL's worst rushing attack. It was dreadful, Rachaad White. And I get from a fantasy standpoint, he's the only one. So whatever, take that, whatever. He's not very good. And so I think maybe they put the ball in Baker Mayfield's hands a little bit. I think they are hoping the offensive line improves a touch. I'm not confident in this one. I am going to go Tampa Bay over 7.5. Just because I think Baker can kind of get this team there. And they've made enough improvements on the offensive line. But I do not have this team making a triumphant return to the postseason by any stretch of the imagination. We now go to the NFC East, and we start with the Dallas Cowboys. Their total is at 9.5. They are plus 185 to win the division. They are currently projected to face the 10th hardest schedule in the league next season. That could lead to a step back with this group. 11 of their games last year were against defenses that ranked among the bottom 12 of teams in the league. They played the easiest schedule of defenses last season. You guys know, if you've watched this for any amount of time, I am not a big Dak Prescott believer. I think the offensive line has taken a step back this year. I think at running back, Rico Dowdle is kind of meh, and Zeke Elliott, isn't what he used to be. CeeDee Lamb is excellent, but there was the whole contract thing that held over all of training camp, and so I worry about his growth as a wide receiver. And then after that, there's not a whole lot behind him aside from Brandon Cooks. Defensively, it's Micah Parsons, and they got a lot of interceptions last year, but we have seen that this is a team that can be a little bit aggressive and can be burned. I think with a whole offseason of looking at a whole offseason of looking at the tape and trying to figure out this defense, I think offensive coordinators around the NFC, and specifically offensive coordinators in this division, are going to be able to take advantage of that. The thing working in the Cowboys' favor is that they do get to play the Giants twice, and they do get to play the Commanders twice. And so I do worry about taking the under on 9.5 when they have a chance to just get 4 wins playing the Giants and the Commanders. But I'm going under on this pick. I am going Dallas under 9.5. I think that this is a mid, if not worse, year for the Dallas Cowboys. And right now, just looking at it, to miss the playoffs is at plus 145. I'm going to go right now. Add that to my picks to click here for Dallas under 9.5 and plus 145 to miss the playoffs. New York Giants over under is at 6.5. They are plus 1,700 to win the division. I don't think we need a whole lot of stats here to tell you that Daniel Jones sucks. Daniel Jones just sucks, and they get him Malik Neighbors, and so that's great. But you lose Saquon Barkley in the process, replace him with Devin Singletary. There's just nothing here offensively. The offensive line still sucks. The playmakers still suck aside from Malik Neighbors. Daniel Jones doesn't have a whole lot to work with there. Defensively, they add Burns. I think that's a big boost. Thibodeau, fantastic. Love him. Rest of the defense, don't buy it for a second. I think this is a brutal, brutal football team. I think Daboll is a really good coach, and so that probably keeps this team from being one of the worst in the league. But yes, this is an easy under 6.5 for me. I don't see this team getting to 7. 7 wins? Are you kidding me? Not a chance. Eagles. 10.5 is the total. They are minus 150 to win the division, plus 500 to win the NFC, plus 440 to be the 1 seed in the NFC, and plus 1,000 to win the Super Bowl. The Philadelphia Eagles, I think, had a great offseason. The secondary fell off a cliff last year. They were 27th in EPA per drop back allowed. They go out and draft Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. That really helps. I think bringing in Bryce Huff and essentially replacing him, replacing Hassan Reddick with him is a brilliant move. And I think that they are a really, really strong team now this year. I think adding Saquon Barkley unlocks a whole lot in this offense. Yes, they lost Jason Kelce, but I do think that the offensive line is still one of the best in the league. It is all down to Jalen Hurts. He has to be the guy who is going out there and lighting the world on fire like he did a year ago. I think he will do that. And so I have Philadelphia coming out of this one. I have them as the winners of this division. I have them over 10.5. Also, the Eagles face the 9th easiest projected schedule in the league, and it gets easier as the season goes onward. They face the easiest schedule of run defenses in the league from week 7 onward. So I have them at I have them over 10.5. I'm circling every pick in this division so far. And also, I have them as plus 440 to be the 1 seed in the NFC, because I don't think a whole lot of this division. Washington, their total sits at 6.5, and they are plus 900 to win the division right now. Jaden Daniels over Sam Howell is an improvement. I think the biggest improvement is not having Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator. With Bieniemy calling plays last year, no team passed the ball more than Washington. 69.4% of all plays were passes. That was first in the league. They had 736 total pass dropbacks. That was also first in the league. They still only had 19 plays of 30-plus yards all year. So they were throwing the ball a ton and not getting any success with it. They faced number 1 lightest boxes on average on first down. Only 44% of snaps saw 7+ defenders in the box. The average is 59%. Despite that, they threw it on 64% of those plays. And even when they were running it, even against those light boxes like Tampa Bay, Washington still couldn't get anywhere. Defensively, they ranked 30th or worse in every major metric, including yards per play allowed, EPA per snap, and a whole lot of other. They ranked 30th in 20+ yard play margin and last in 30+ yard play margin. No unit allowed more plays of 15+ yards last year than Washington's defense. And so that is where, I think Jaden Daniels is going to be actually a whole lot of fun with this offense this year. And I think coaching-wise, they have upgraded quite a bit, even though I don't think Dan Quinn's all that good. This team still, and Kyle Kingsbury, offensive coordinator, this team still isn't very good. I'm not going to click on Washington under 6.5, but we are going to take the Commanders under 6.5. Our last one, the NFC West. It is starting with Arizona. Their total is at 6.5. They are plus 1,100 to win this division. I had them as one of the more undervalued teams in the league. Kyler Murray returned in week 10 last year. This offense got so much better. From week 10 on, according to Warren Sharp, the Cardinals won early down success rate battle in the first, in half of their games, sorry. They won 3 games outright and had offensive performances that ranked well inside the top 10. That was despite facing 5 playoff teams in those 8 games: the Texans, the Rams, the 49ers, the Eagles, and the Steelers, as well as the Seahawks. They were incredibly efficient across the board. And Kyler Murray helped out in the run game as well. That allowed them to really grow. The defense, one of the worst constructed defenses in the history of the sport. No question about that. And the defense now is projected to face the number 1 most difficult schedule of offenses in the NFL. They go on the road to face the Bills, 49ers, Packers, and Dolphins in the first 8 weeks of the season. The good thing is the Cardinals did spend on defense. Justin Jones, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Bilal Nichols, and Mac Wilson, all brought in to try to help this defense out. I do think that with Kyler, a full season of him adding to those efficiency numbers, Marvin Harrison Jr. now at his disposal, because he's doing all those numbers with Greg Dortch as the number one wide receiver, right? And so I think that there is a real opportunity for this to be one of the best offenses in the league. And so I have them at over 6.5. The plus 1100 on the division is that is not going to be a pick I lock in. But that is going to be one that we at least put a little bit of a sprinkle on just to see, because I think they could do it. The San Francisco 49ers. Over-under is at 11.5. They are minus 200 to win the division, plus 275 to win the NFC, and plus 625 to win the Super Bowl. I have them as one of the most overvalued teams in the league, and it's for a couple of reasons. One, I think this team got incredible injury luck last year. None of their starters basically got hurt until Greenlaw's leg exploded coming out off the field or onto the field during the Super Bowl. Like, they just had no injury problems all season long. Also, from week 7 on, the 49ers play the NFL's 4th most difficult schedule of opponents. During that span, they are at a rest disadvantage in 6 of those 11 games. Week 7 against Kansas City, the Chiefs are off of a bye. Week 8 against Dallas, the Cowboys are off of a bye. Week 11 against Seattle, the Seahawks are off of their bye. Week 13 against Buffalo, the Bills are coming off of their bye. Chicago coming off of a mini bye in week 14, and week 18, Arizona has extra rest because San Francisco will be playing on Monday Night Football the week before. I just feel like it is all stacking up, and Super Bowl hangover is just a thing. It has been for a while. And so, yes, I still think the 49ers are one of the most talented teams in the NFL. And if we just got to do a Madden season with no injuries, I think the 49ers have a very good chance of winning it. That being said, I just feel like something is going to happen with this team this year. And so I'm going to put them at under 11.5 wins. And plus 350 to miss the playoffs is so tempting right now. Next up, it is the Seattle Seahawks. 7.5 is the win total. They are plus 700 to win the division. This team has been just mid for so long. I think the big thing here is Mike McDonald coming in. I love the Ravens defense. He was excellent in getting the most out of that team. I think he is inheriting a talented defense that has underachieved greatly over the last little bit. And so I think if he can really maximize things with guys like Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy and some of those other, Witherspoon as well, who we mentioned on the Difference Makers the other day, I think this team has a very good opportunity of making some noise. I love Seattle over 7.5, and I am actually going to lock in them at plus 700 to win the division. That is, both of those are going to be picks that I click. So loving that one. Also, there is Seattle plus 165 to make the playoffs. That is another one we are getting. We are back in on the Seattle bandwagon, ignoring that Geno Smith is our quarterback. We are back on the Seattle bandwagon for another year. And last one, it's the LA Rams. Over-under is at 9.5. They are plus 325 to win the division. I have them as an overvalued team. I don't look at a whole lot of the stats in anything from last year with the Rams. I think I just have concerns that Matthew Stafford will fall off here at some point. You are requiring best case scenario from Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams in year 2 after I basically think you got it in year 1. You are requiring a whole lot of help from Cooper Kupp. A whole lot of health, from Cooper Kupp when you haven't been guaranteed that over the last little while. And you are assuming that your defense can replace the best defensive player in the NFL for the last 30 years. It just seems like so much of it is stacked up kind of against the LA Rams. And so I have them under 9.5. That is absolutely one that I am going to click on as well. To miss the playoffs at minus 130. I don't love props at minus, so we'll just leave that one alone. So now it comes time to figure out what our NFC playoffs look like. And I definitely should have had my bracket made before. So we have a 2 seed, They'll face the 7 seed. Just to recap, and because I am writing this all out on the fly, very professionally and whatnot, you have the 3 seed facing the 6 seed, and the 4 seed facing the 5 seed, with the 1 seed getting a bye in the next round. And so 1 seed, we already locked that in. That was the Philadelphia Eagles. Coming in as our 2 seed, God, it is so tempting to go with Green Bay. I do think, though, Detroit probably wins that division. So we'll say Detroit is the 2. I do think Green Bay ends up as the top wild card team in the NFC. So we will go with the Packers at 2, or sorry, the Lions at 2. We are going to have Seattle be our 3 seed, which means Atlanta is our 4 seed. And now we have 2 wildcard teams that we need to get in there. I am going to say San Francisco gets in, even though we went under on their total. We have Dallas to miss, so we just can't put them in. So you know what? 3 teams out of the AFC West, baby. We're going with Arizona getting into that postseason tournament. So after that, I do think Detroit will beat Arizona in the postseason tournament. So we will have Detroit as our 2 seed, advancing. Seattle against San Francisco. I think San Francisco is the better team. So we will go with San Francisco in that spot. Atlanta against Green Bay. Give me the Green Bay Packers. Philadelphia against San Francisco is such an interesting matchup in our AFC or NFC divisional round, but I believe in Philadelphia for a reason. I am going with the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think Green Bay gets the upset over Detroit. I think Green Bay gets the win there, and let's just keep that train rolling, baby. Let's go Green Bay freaking Packers to the Super Bowl as your NFC champion. So what, did I even put that down as a possibility on my odds sheet? If I didn't say it before, I didn't. Yeah, Green Bay, plus 700 to win the NFC. That is an interesting one that we will click on. So we are going big on a couple of teams. So that is the NFC preview. What about the AFC? It's time for AFC win totals. We begin in the AFC East. It is the Buffalo Bills. Their total sits at 10.5. They are plus 160 to win the division, plus 750 to win the AFC. I had them as an overvalued team this season. I think that with Milano hurt on the defensive side, there is great concern about this team. I think when you look at the teams that they faced last year, Warren Sharp again providing most of the stats with his book, amazing. Absolutely recommend going out and buying it and downloading it. The Bills faced these quarterbacks last year: Zach Wilson, Jimmy Garoppolo, Sam Howell, Tyrod Taylor, Mac Jones, Tim Boyle, Easton Stick, Billy Zappi, and Russell Wilson. In 2024, the slate of quarterbacks are projected to be a top 10. That the slate of quarterbacks that the Bills are expected to face. They all have, or they have a number of high-level players who left this defense, and now Milano isn't going to be there. And so I think there is just real concern about what this team is going to be defensively. And I think that there is a real lack of star power and skill, quite frankly, on the offensive side as well, aside from Josh Allen and, quite frankly, James Cook. The offensive line, I think, is a little bit of a concern as well. The only reason you could buy into Buffalo this year is because Josh Allen is awesome. And Josh Allen is absolutely awesome, but I think that this is expecting a level of awesomeness from him that is just not there. And so I am going to go under 10.5 on the Buffalo Bills, and quickly looking at it, the Bills to miss the playoffs is plus 140. Let's just write that one down and keep it off to the side. We'll see about the playoff teams. It's a really, really good conference, as you all know. The Miami Dolphins at 9.5. They are plus 215 to win the division. I had them as an undervalued team. We know the issues. they absolutely struggled against playoff teams last year. They were 1-5. The Dolphins are now expected to face 10 teams that finished over 500 in 2023. 9 of those are 9 of those are projected to do that this year. They do face the eighth easiest projected schedule in the league. And so they face a lot of good teams, but they face a lot of bad teams as well. It is kind of all over the place a little bit. I do think that people are forgetting how good this team was at the start of the year. It all fell apart. And some of the players that were hurt then are still hurt now. And so that is concerning on the defensive side. But when the injuries came up, this team felt like a lock to win the division. They were locked in. But they needed their big collapse and a huge turnaround from the Buffalo Bills to make their way into to make their way into this being a team that didn't win the division and had to go out on the road, an abysmal playoff game. Everyone remembered that. But this is still an offense that pushed the ball downfield a little bit more. This is still an offense that has Tyreek Hill, has Devon Achane in another year, has Raheem Mostert, who is still very good. Jalen Waddle is like the third fastest guy on the team and would be the fastest guy on most teams. And I think Tua is still very good at getting the ball out very, very quickly. And so, yes, the offensive line is a bit of a concern, but I do think that the way this offense is set up, they can still get big plays off of it. I'm aware, like looking at going back and when we did the stuff I'm worried I'm wrong about episode, Miami was tops at that list because I know there is absolutely a part of this where it just doesn't work. The offensive line gives Tua no time to get the ball downfield. He's not able to get the ball to his weapons. The offense looks ugly. The defense is just a sieve that gets picked through, and this team gets just whooped on by teams that finished above 500 last year, even though they have the eighth easiest projected schedule in the league. I know there are a lot of ways this goes wrong, but I just have to, I just believe in the talent of this team. So I'm going over 9.5, and I'm going at plus 215 to win this division. After that, we have New England. Their total is at 4.5. They are plus 2,700 to win the division. I don't know how you can assume this team is going to do anything this year. The offensive line is so bad, they don't even trust to put their newly drafted quarterback back there. They have no one for Jacoby Brissett to throw the ball to. Defensively, Matthew Judon is gone. I just think this is going to be a really, really bad football team. Over 4.5, not a chance. 5 wins for this group? No. I think New England has a better chance of finishing with the worst record in the league. So I'm going under 4.5 on New England, and that is one that we will circle as well. They face the second hardest projected schedule in the NFL. And then we get to the New York Jets. Their total is at 10.5. I have them as overvalued. They were plus 170 to win the division. I want to hate this team more than I do, and it is all because of Aaron Rodgers. Last year, we were very anti-Jets because of Aaron Rodgers, and not just the whole who he is thing, but I thought he was looking cooked his last year in Green Bay. And so I thought going into last year, he was going to be done. Then he gets the injury, and now we are presuming that he comes back and helps lead this team to the promised land. I just don't think so. But it is such a good football team except for him. Like, you look at what they did to some high-level quarterbacks last year. They held C.J. Stroud to 4 yards an attempt. In all other games, he averaged 8.4. They held Dak Prescott to 5.8 yards an attempt. All other games, he averaged 7.7. They held Josh Allen. You hear where I'm going with this? Allen, Hurts, Mahomes, Prescott, Stroud, all significantly or relatively. The Mahomes one, it's a 2-yard drop, but or a 0.2-yard drop. But still, all of these quarterbacks, high-level quarterbacks, they had played, those guys had their worst games of the year against the New York Jets. Robert Saleh can coach the fuck out of a defense, man. I will tell you that. And they got amazing defensive players. They also are projected to have the 4th easiest schedule of opponents in the league this year. I'm not going to go over on them, but I do think that this is a team that makes the playoffs. So I'm going to say under 10.5, but make the playoffs. So we are walking a very fine line with this team. There's a sweet spot that we can get with this group. But I think we can get there. And I think that I think we can do it with this team. Moving on to the AFC North, the Baltimore Ravens, 10.5 is the win total. They are plus 145 to win the division, plus 550 to win the AFC, and plus 1200 to win the Super Bowl. They had 3 starters in the offensive line leave. They have Mike McDonald, who was the defensive coordinator, and I thought got a great bit out of this team, gone as well. And so that is a real concern. Patrick Queen, who I think is the biggest addition to any team in the NFL this year, which has to mean it's the biggest subtraction from any team in the NFL. He is on his way out. But this is a murderer's row to start the year. And Vegas. So they are at Kansas City to start the season. Home Raiders, at Dallas, home Buffalo, at Cincinnati. After that, they do have the NFL's 14th easiest schedule to close the year and face just 2 teams expected to win 10 plus games. So I just think Lamar is good enough, even with a bad offensive line or a young offensive line. And I think they still have enough pieces on this defense that they can get something pretty good out of it. And I think that there is going to be some growth in guys like Zay Jones and some other pieces of this offense that, and Derrick Henry coming in. I don't think he has to be amazing, but I think he fits this team really interestingly. So I do think Baltimore goes over 10.5. Not a pick we're going to click on, but I that's just my prediction for these guys. Cincinnati, total is at 10.5. They are plus 160 to win the division and plus 700 to win the conference. They are going to be missing a couple of guys. DJ Reader is gone, and Uzie also gone. Over the last 2 years, the Bengals were the number 1 run defense in the league with Reader on the field. They were dead last in yards per carry allowed with Reader off of the field. Now, they do have a decently easy slate of quarterbacks that they will face this year, not in the division. Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, or Jacoby Brissett, Will Levis, Aiden O'Connell, or Gardner Minshew, and Bryce Young. So they do have a schedule that sets up really well. But I have major concerns about everything going on with the receiver contracts. I have major concerns with the Joe Burrow not throwing 2 days in a row thing. So I'm going to go Cincinnati under 10.5 win totals. And again, I'm going to look and see they are plus 190 to miss the playoffs. Just something I'm writing down just in case. We're not circling it just yet. Cleveland is next. They are at 8.5. That is their total, plus 525 to win the division. They changed quarterbacks 11 times last year, which is insane. I think it was like 5 or 6 or 7 actual quarterbacks, but the switches that they made 11 times. Their defense was unbelievable. They ranked first in non-sack EPA allowed last year, the best of any team since 2019, and the 5th best since 2000. They are an incredible unit. They finished 2nd in pressure rate and 6th in sacks last year. Myles Garrett, unbelievable. 14 sacks, 18.3% pressure rate, which ranked 4th among pass rushers. He, according to ESPN, was 2nd in their pass rush win metric last year. So the defense, unbelievable. The offense, you have concerns. Nick Chubb is banged up. I do like Jerome Ford, as we've talked about in fantasy. Amari Cooper is there, and he is fine. Deshaun Watson, though, has looked cooked. He was 42nd out of 45 quarterbacks with at least 300 attempts over the last 2 years, 42nd in EPA per play, 36th in yards per attempt, and 38th in off-target rate. 17% of his throws were deemed off-target last year, tied with Trevor Siemian for the worst mark among quarterbacks with at least 150 attempts. I don't think this offense is going to be good enough to get them to 9 wins. So I'm going to go under 8.5 on the Cleveland Browns. Pittsburgh Steelers are next. Their total is at 8.5. They are plus 550 to win this division. So here are the reasons why I don't think it's going to work. They have the hardest projected schedule in the league, and Russell Wilson is a bad quarterback. Here are the reasons why I think it might work. Arthur Smith is a better offensive coordinator than this team has had in the last half decade, even though I'm not a huge fan of his. And this defense is ridiculously good. They get a healthy TJ Watt, another year of development from Highsmith, And they added Patrick Queen, who I think is really going to help out this team defensively. I think that this is going to be a bit of a juggernaut of a defense. I think Pittsburgh goes over 8.5. And I think there is a real chance that this Steelers team makes the playoffs in this upcoming season. We will get to playoff picks here in a little bit. On to the AFC South. Houston, their total is at 9.5. They are minus 120 to win the division, plus 500 to win the AFC. They played the easiest schedule of quarterbacks last season. They are projected to face the 10th hardest schedule of quarterbacks this year. The quarterbacks they beat last year: Kenny Pickett, Will Levis twice, Derek Carr, Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Gardner Minshew, Baker Mayfield, and Joe Burrow. I have concerns about this defense. And that is where I have a slight little hitch in my giddy up about picking the Texans to actually then actually like make their way. I feel like this defense is going to hold this team back from being elite, is what I am trying to say. And that's why I can't just fully go all in on the Houston Texans. Offensively, they were great. CJ Stroud was unbelievable. Youngest quarterback to win a playoff game in NFL history. Most passing yards in a game by a rookie in NFL history. Most passes without an interception to start a career in NFL history. So I think the Houston Texans can be good. Can be quite good. I think they probably go over 9.5, but I don't think this team wins the division. I think they can get to 10 wins and still not win this division. Tell you why in a sec. The Indianapolis Colts, their total is at 8.5. I worry about Anthony Richardson and him as a quarterback just in general. But the thing I really worry about is this team defensively. They were horrendous last year. They will play the 5th hardest schedule in the league during the first 12 weeks of the season. It does kind of get easier as it goes on, but the easy games they play are late in the year and against cold weather teams, New England, New York, and Denver. They play on the road in those cities all late. Now, New England sucks, so they probably got to win in that game. But I do think that this is still a growth year for this team. On non-blitzes, also offensive line-wise, Indy allowed pressure in 2.5 seconds or less at the league's 3rd worst rate. So I just think that the quarterback's a little unproven. The offensive line isn't very good and the defense sucks. I have to think Indy takes another kind of step back this year. Wins-wise, I think that there's going to be some signs where it's like, okay, this is actually a team here. And I think that is going to be It like Chicago in the last one. They're going to go probably under their win total, but you're going to feel better about it, I think. Jacksonville, their total is at 8.5. They're plus 320 to win the division. A reminder, going into last year, going into week 10, Trevor Lawrence had this team at 6-2. They were the only team in the AFC South with a winning record. Out of 33 quarterbacks with 100 passing attempts, Lawrence's average time to throw was 2.3 seconds, second fastest in the NFL. He had some issues with the offensive line, but he was also extremely good, I thought. And so I think that this is a team that probably takes some steps forward this year. I think Trevor Lawrence, fully healthy, can still be that game changer. I think that Brian Thomas as a receiver has a chance to still be something, has a chance to be something actually pretty special. I think Etienne is a really talented running back. I think defensively with Josh Hines Allen, that they have a defense that can at least get after the quarterback here. They do face the projected 2nd toughest schedule in the league over the first 13 weeks. 8 of 12 games are against teams that made the playoffs last year. And so I do think that this is a team that will start slow, but I do think Jacksonville comes out, and I have Jacksonville winning this division. So plus 325 to win the division. And just quickly here, what do we get for making the playoffs for Jacksonville? Plus 115. Probably not enough, given some of the other investments we're making on this. But Jacksonville at over 8.5 is what we are going to do with this particular team. Tennessee, their total sits at 6.5. They are plus 1,000 to win the division. I think that Tennessee is being really overlooked. I have them as the undervalued team. They do face the sixth hardest projected schedule in the league. But I do think that they made significant improvements on the defense. They spent a ton of money to get better defensively, which is an area they needed to. They have spent first round picks the last 2 years on the offensive line. And I think Will Levis is actually better than people think. I think that he had a dreadful offensive line last year, and that really limited him. I think if that offensive line can improve, then this team is really going to do some things. Maybe not, like, I don't think this is a team that makes the playoffs, but I do have Tennessee over 6.5 right now in the AFC South. I think that Will Levis, he was the starter from weeks 8 to 15. This team ran at a 53% rate. However, Will Levis actually was pretty good on, what is it here? On first down, he was number 5 in EPA per attempt. He was 11th in success rate and 8th in yards per attempt. With Derrick Henry off of the field, his EPA jumped by like 7x. He had a 65% success rate and 13.3 yards per attempt compared to 7.4 with Derrick Henry on the field. Will Levis was a quarterback who liked to push the ball down the field. He just didn't have the time to, and this was on a run-first offense. I think in a more balanced offense, I'm not saying Derrick Henry held this team back. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I think Will Levis, his stats and the eye test even a little bit skewed by what was going on there. I think he takes a pretty significant step forward this year. I don't think the Titans make the playoffs, but I do have them at over 6.5. And then we get to the AFC West. The Kansas City Chiefs. They are, their total is at 11.5. This is going to be a pretty quick divisional breakdown. They are minus 310 to win the division. They're going to win the division. And I have a bunch of stats here. It doesn't matter. This team, they are just so much better than everyone in the AFC West. They are such a talented football team. And I do think that because of all the weapons they have, not only offensively that Rashee Rice is going to hang around, but defensively, this team turned themselves into one of the best defenses in the league last year. They are just better. So Kansas City over 11.5. We're not going to overthink it. The Raiders, their total is at 6.5. They're plus 900 to win the division. The offense was very conservative last year. They were in the back third of the league in basically every offensive category. The way they won was by not turning the ball over. And so I think that their offense, they're intriguing a little bit because of some of the weapons they have. If Gardner Minshew can just get the ball to Adams, get the ball to Myers, you can start to see some things. I am very curious as to how they use Brock Bowers. If there is some creativity on this offense, then this is a team that can, I think, utilize this kid greatly, and I think they can really grow. I just don't know about Coach Pierce, and I just don't know about this offense. I think that it is going to become very predictable, and it's just not an overly talented team. So I can't go over 6.5 on the Raiders. I am going to go under 6.5. For the Denver Broncos, a lot of their defensive stats are skewed because Miami kicked the shit out of them in, I think it was week 7 last year. Even still, the defense wasn't all that good. But they are projected to face the 4th easiest schedule of offenses. So that's helpful, I think, for this team. Offensively, I am not a Bo Nix fan. I think Sean Payton's a little overrated because he had Drew Brees as his quarterback for such a long time. And so I think that this is just quite a bad football team. We are going to go under 6.5 on the Denver Broncos. And finally, the LA Chargers. Their total is at 6.5. This is an easy over for me. They have the 2nd easiest projected schedule in the NFL. They face the 6th easiest projected run schedule of run defenses in the NFL. They're projected to be a run-heavy team. They do have rest disadvantages in the back part of the year, but they have a significant upgraded coach in Jim Harbaugh over Staley. And I just think that maybe we are overlooking how good Justin Herbert is. And I get he doesn't have the weapons to throw to, but this was a crazy stat from Warren Sharp. In looking back at the last 2 years combined, out of 34 possible games, there were only 6 where both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen were played healthy. weeks 14 to 17 of 2022, weeks 1 and 2 of 2023. 6 games out of 34. That's 17%. So these guys, this team was already playing without those guys basically anyway. And I get you had one of them on the field. It wasn't just a complete loss. But this team wasn't winning off of any of that anyway. And so I just think that with some improvements in coaching, maybe some improvements in philosophy, that this is going to be a team that takes a step forward. And the rest of the division is just bad. So aside from the Chiefs. So I'm going to go Chargers over at 6.5. So now we get into the postseason. And so again, making my bracket here really quickly. 3 will face 6. 4 will face 5, which means we have a 1 seed here. They will face that team, and then we have others, and then we have this one, and then Super Bowl. Okay, our 1 seed this year. I kind of just have to go Kansas City. Everyone else, there's too many question marks in the division that concern me, but actually, you know what? No, we're gonna go Kansas City. We're not gonna overthink this one. Baltimore will be our 2 seed. Absolutely. We will have Miami as our 3 seed, and we will have Jacksonville as our 4 seed. We will have Houston as our 5 seed. So the AFC South gets a couple of playoff teams. Again, I want to have Buffalo and the Jets maybe missing the playoffs. I just don't think I can put them behind the AFC North teams. Like, I think Pittsburgh has a decent chance of making the playoffs, but I will go Buffalo as the 7 seed and the Jets as the 6 seed out in Miami. So that will mean that Baltimore will beat Buffalo in their AFC wildcard game. I do think that the Dolphins will get the job done at home against the New York Jets, so they will be the 3 seed, and I will have Houston beating Jacksonville as my upset in the first round in the AFC side of things, which means it'll be Kansas City against Houston. That one goes to Kansas City. Baltimore against Miami. I will have Miami winning that one and going to the AFC title game where they will lose to Kansas City. And so now my Super Bowl prediction is Kansas City against Green Bay, and I will go for the 3rd year in a row with the Kansas City Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. That concludes a near month-long process of previewing the National Football League. Let's get to the games. It's going to be a whole lot of fun, and we got a ton of coverage coming up here on Couch Potato Diary for the NFL season, and we have some major plans starting hopefully next week here on this channel and on all my other ones. A lot of really fun stuff planned. So make sure you subscribe. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. If you are listening on podcast form, make sure you subscribe there. Leave a review. If you're watching here, like the video, and I will talk to all of you later. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.